The website is Pillars of Wisdom. Go there now. And we are joined by a very special guest, GLO, a man of mystery.
You're on mute, brother.
I'll unmute you here.
Okay, I'm good.
Yeah, you're good.
We can hear you. Welcome to.
Yeah.
Welcome
Okay,
to the,
thanks for having me on.
We are ready to have some fun tonight. You've got a very interesting book. Jim has a copy he'll hold up. It's a hardcover book for those who love occult books, and we love all types of occult books. It's a beautiful hardcover book.
Thank you so much.
This thing is
Who did
something.
the illustrations in there? Some of those pictures are just fire, bro. Like
I had
the one
a-
with the two watered beasts. That thing is fantastic.
I had a whole art team, and I really pushed my people really hard to bring out the highest quality of this book. And it's a labor of love, and it was a lot of hard work, both on the writing side and on the artistic side. Thank you so much.
This is an incredible book, and you'll want to order a couple copies now. It's difficult to get your hands on it.
Please.
The only way to get it is print on demand, as far as I understand.
I've been a victim of censorship for a long time, so I think print on demand is the safest way for me to get my book out until I get my my printing going in Europe and here in North America. So
Beautiful. So this is the first edition, and we love first edition books, rare books, hard to get. You'll want to have a few copies on your shelf, pass them down, give them to your sons, your granddaughters, give them out to all the kids. It's good education, good pictures. What really inspired you to write these down in a hard copy? Your articles were shared on places like Reddit, and then they were removed.
So I started writing for the Red Pill. It's a controversial anti-feminist community. And hold on. So it's a controversial anti-feminist community, and there's different, let's say, there's different genres within the Red Pill. Some of it's more advice, some of it's more political. The Manosphere, it's a place where men go to exchange, figure out dating advice, became politicized in 2013 after Gamergate. And
After
so
what?
Gamergate. There was Gamergate is the scandal where one of the I forgot her name, but basically she was being paid to she was being given bribes to give unfair ratings for video games.
It was a big thing then in the
Okay.
gaming community. It kind of enlivened all of the people that were just laying back playing video games to be like, hey, fuck this. We're not going to just lay back anymore. We're offended. We're pissed off. And it's a pretty severe tipping point. Is that 2013? Was it that long ago?
Yeah, it's 2013. So what happened was there was Occupy Wall Street in like 2010, and then from there, to distract the left from attacking the big banks, they pushed SJW feminism, and then later there was Gamergate, and that's what really politicized a lot of people who just didn't really care about politics or culture. And I came in, I was a board law student, and I just wanted to write. And I came into this anti-feminist space, and I wanted to write. I didn't really care about promoting anything. I just wanted to write the best articles. And I saw dating as an extension of sociology and economics and religion. And I got into political fights, and I fought everyone on the Red Pill because most of them are just trying to make a quick buck. They're trying to blame women for all of their problems, and they don't understand economic causality, and they definitely don't understand what you guys talk about as religious or spiritual causality. So as I started pushing these deeper topics, like basic sociology, basic economics, one, I started getting deleted by Reddit, like the highest levels of Reddit. And then later I started getting deleted by the admins because, you know, they don't have what you guys have of a willingness to read books, a willingness to dig, a willingness to figure out the core, right? So I kind of pushed my stuff uphill for 10 years while everyone was starting to delete it. And I had my own core audience and I had my own community. But at the end of the day, all of my writings was behind walls and censorship. And so I thought the best way for me to avoid this censorship is to push my book out. And once my book's in your hands, no one can take it from you. No one can censor it. And once I get my printing presses up, I have a printing press in Athens, and I might get one in Mexico. They're not going to be able to censor me. So, I've had PhD dissertations written against me. I've had feminists do performances against me. So there's very strong forces trying to censor me, primarily because of sociology and economics. But once, let's say, my new mystical theories start getting pushed out, I'm sure I'll get religious pushback too.
We'd definitely like to hear about those. That's an interesting subject, and we're primarily an occult type show. The Weaving Spiders are, and so that sounds like a very interesting subject.
Okay, so one of the things that I want to expose people to is a symbolic literacy, right? So I know there's different opinions on a lot of different things, but symbolism is its own language. And if you go into a church, if you go into a mosque, regardless of which religion you look at, it's filled with symbolism. And there's rituals, there's an extensive language taking place that's trying to engage with you at the subconscious, unconscious level. And I think one of the easiest starting points is to learn tarot, it's to learn numerology, it's to learn alchemy, it's to learn astrology and figure out how all of those things come together, right? And one of the things, my book has multiple layers, but as you guys know, you guys are literate symbolically. My book is filled with astrology, and every one of my chapters has an astrological alchemical designation. So something that's about rules or restriction, you're going to see Saturn in Capricorn. Duality, you're going to start seeing Gemini. And for me, you can say my book is a tarot deck. I can start teaching people that language. So when it starts getting flashed in the Super Bowl or whatever the magicians behind the United States decide to do, at least common people can have some understanding and have some acclamation. So that was my thinking. That's I guess that's one main thing. I think as things start getting crazier and crazier, and if you see all the symbolism in music videos and in movies, the more of that symbolism the more you know what let's say some dark magicians are going to be doing in the future. So I think I know some people have different views on religion. That's okay. And I'm not here to push any view here. But what I want to say is,
are you?
I'm the most controversial religion.
What's that?
It's the Jewish religion. So,
Oh,
yeah,
no shit.
yeah.
Wow.
So what branch of
Didn't
Judaism?
see that coming.
Yeah, I like. Well, so my experience right now has been, Chabad is very welcoming in terms of making sure that you're observant in terms of Sabbath, and that you, as a Jew, don't break your religious obligations that you're tied into. That my people made a covenant with God, and there's a pact, and if you don't follow that pact, you're not going to live a good life. So they're helpful in making sure that you're within, let's say, the pact that we as a people are in. But in terms of mysticism, I've been talking to them, and they're not helping. They're not helping at all. They're not giving me anything. And I don't know. I've been looking through the Zohar. There's a new translation from Stanford University. I don't know if you guys are familiar. It's called the Pritzker edition. So if you want to learn Kabbalism, look, I'm not a Kabbalism expert. I'm just starting to dig. So I don't want to go outside of my expertise, but there's a lot of interesting stuff on LibGen. And in terms of Kabbalism, I'm in a position of digging, and I'm in a position of within the Jewish prayers figuring out the Kabbalistic attributions or which spheres they're calling upon in every prayer. But by no means do I have a depth of knowledge in that field. You know,
Right. You haven't been practicing for a long, long time and have it all memorized and everything as far as the Kabbalah.
What brought me to Kabbalism is in the red pill, there's a lot of flawed men, and they have a lot of problems. And in order for me to work with them and understand what's going on, I figured out psychoanalysis. And from there, I figured out Lacanian psychoanalysis, which is Freudian psychoanalysis plus linguistics. But as I started digging within those psychoanalysts,
and say
Lacan.
Yeah, okay.
He's a French psychoanalyst that combines linguistic theory with psychoanalysis. So there's
he's
a little
big
bit
in
more.
Europe, Sean.
I think
He's
I've heard the name.
Not big here, but in Europe, he's huge.
He's in America. They do ego psychology, where they just tell everyone to be more confident and repress. And basically, what you see in these American managerial guides, whereas Europe has a deeper psychoanalytic theory. But the point I want to get to is, as I started digging through psychoanalysis, and especially Hegel, I started sensing that there was something religious behind it, and there was something that they were leaving out. And until I started digging in religious texts, I could never get to the bottom of it. And once, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Lacan's graph of desire, it's very similar to the Kabbalistic tree, right? So for me, I started off in a non-religious psychoanalysis, but to really, really get to the bottom, you have to figure out what gave birth to it. And it's probably Kabbalism. So once I exhausted psychoanalysis, I wanted to dig deeper. And at some point, you're going to have to cross the threshold into mysticism. And that's right where I'm starting to right now. And when I did that, I guess a lot of my team flipped out on me because it was psychologically or spiritually too much for them. Maybe they weren't meant to have this knowledge. And as you guys probably know, some of this information is jarring. So I guess where I want to warn maybe your listeners is that when you share truly occult information, you will know, because you're going to receive severe pushback. And it doesn't have to be anything too controversial. Maybe you're going to be explaining Pythagorean numerology or something light. You're already going to start getting fought on it, I guess.
Yeah, I'd say that makes sense. That because you take people, people, whether they realize it or not, I would say that their main fear and discomfort is the unknown. That's why we see so many people being willing to repeat negative patterns. And so if you take them into the genuine unknown, not just kind of a vaguely unfamiliar area, but truly unknown space, they kind of get triggered and freak out usually,
Yes, there's religion and there's mysticism, right? And in religion, you try and help people by giving them a source of comfort. So maybe someone died, maybe there's some kind of tragedy, and the priest class is there to help people stabilize, and they're also there to help governments stabilize their people, regardless of if it's a good government or a bad government. Priest class stabilizes the people. In mysticism, it's kind of like a PhD program. You're digging for the truth, and you're going to start finding things that are unsettling and you don't know how to quilt. And some people aren't meant for that knowledge, and emotionally they don't have that, and they're going to lash out on you because you're the closest person. You're the person who's causing the emotional discomfort. So
sounds like a dark night of the soul moment.
I guess.
So the terms you're going to find to explain what you're talking about is esoteric versus exoteric. Exoteric is for the masses, because the masses can't really conceptualize the higher meanings of things. but they also need to be included in the base understanding, so that way it gets carried on. You see this in a lot of mythological stories where orally the tradition was passed on, and it needs to be somewhat entertaining, so that way the common mind can carry it, but hidden inside of that is the esoteric meanings, which have a much higher value that only certain minds are going to go and seek out.
Yeah, so one of the things that you're going to find in the Bible, and I had a Catholic friend really lash out on me, is so, some of the scholars have figured out which energies are behind every event in the Bible. So there's a almost a programming language behind every verse in the Bible. And you can see, like, why did Cain come into being? Why did Abel come into being? And I'm not at a level of fluency or understanding to really understand what's going on in those texts that I purchased. But it's interesting for me that they've been able to peel back that layer and see the source code. So have right here, I don't know if you guys know, it's called Gates of Verses, and it's very advanced stuff. It's by the Arizal, and it breaks down Genesis and every when God created the world in 7 days, which, let's say, programming language commands he utilized. And then from there, you can start tracing those energies. Later on in Kabbalism, which I completely don't know or fully understand yet, the big part of Kabbalism is how to make a golem, right? How can you animate a clay being into a living entity?
Homunculus!
And the theory behind that, like, where does that come from? It's, if you understand how God created Adam, if you understand that process, you can utilize that process, allegedly, into creating a golem.
Our friend Juan Ayala is the how do you say that? Homuncologist.
Okay. Yeah, so all of the magic that you see, or a lot of it, is present in the Bible in a coded way, and then it can later be reappropriated, and regardless of whether that's a positive or a negative way, that's a separate thing. But theurgic magic is magic that originates from the Bible. And so I think regardless of whether you're Catholic or you're Jewish, at the highest level, your religious authority or your clergy will have that knowledge. They're not going to share it with you. But if you dig on Amazon, maybe you can buy some books that will point you in the right or maybe the very wrong direction.
So interesting that this book you held up is available on Amazon. So there's some books that seem to be available. Your work has been removed. You've posted it free on Reddit, no charge, and you've joined the community, and you've asked for people to join in with your work. And this was, when did you start doing this on Reddit? It was about 10 years ago.
Yeah, so I started in 2013, and I just wanted to fight in the culture war. Mm-hmm. And the more I pushed into the culture war, the more I started saying, okay, like, yes, there's big money, but behind the big money, there is a religious occult practice. Mm-hmm. And there's an attempt to bring people down in terms of their souls, so they're further from God. And I didn't have the vocabulary to understand what was going on. So I started digging, and through a combination of Anna's Archive, YouTube, buying books on Amazon, I put together this library here and other books to understand what was going on. That's one thing. To kind of comment on what you're saying is, from my understanding, keep in mind, I'm not by any means a scholar, so I could be wrong. don't quote me. Chabad believes that the age of the Messiah is close. And because of that, a lot of texts which were only in Hebrew or Aramaic are being translated now and are available for consumption, because they say we're in the Messianic era, all bets are off.
Sure.
So the book that I held up, Gates of Verses, is a super secret book that was burnt by the Spanish Inquisition that would never be available in plain English, even, let's say, 40 years ago. So now is a really good time to start buying these books and reading these books. If that aligns with your values. I'm not trying to impose anything or any religion, but I'm just saying right now it is available because high up, from what I understand, a rabbinic ruling was made saying that all bets are off. Let it out.
So in Christianity, there's the idea of the apocalypse, the end times, the apocalypse being like an unveiling of information, like the veil removed from the eyes to see. Do you think that the information that's being published now and made available to everyone has to do with this idea of the apocalypse and revealing otherwise hidden information?
The way I understand it is when there's a lot of veils, right? And you can think of God as an infinite power supply, and you're like a light bulb at the end. And as you get closer to God, you can absorb more electricity. So you're actually protected from these veils. And these veils give you the ability to experience free will, because if you were in the presence of God, he would just overpower you with his energy. Now, when you approach the apocalypse, there's going to be greater energy fluctuations. And you're going to start seeing things that really challenge your free will, because, well, if I can see a miracle, then I don't have the freedom to be an atheist, right? I kind of got to go with it. So one is this. The other thing, from what it feels like, is there's a decline in literacy. So they just kind of got to get it out. And I think it feels like they're confident that you're not going to be able to piece it together. So fuck it,
Mm-hmm.
But
are you feeling like it's somewhat revelation of the method also?
No, because it's just all coded. Like, if it was revelation of the method, I feel like it would be a lot more obvious. And here it's like, here's the 10 spheres, here's how they interact. It's still heavily coded. You have to approach it almost like a chemist. If you want to figure it out, like, get 10 of your smartest dudes together and pound through it. So they're not. Revelation of the method seems to be like a Super Bowl situation, whereas here's a text that was, in some like bizarre Aramaic dialect in the 1600s. Then it was translated into English for academic study, and then through that it leaked to us, the non-academics and the non-clergy.
So So in your ecological studies and all of this, when you're talking about, excuse me, how it seems to be there's an underlying religious context behind all of it. This is the particular religion that you found, or this is the one that you chose, and you're seeing it in places.
Okay, so there's a little confusion. So I'm born Jewish. I got this Middle Eastern beard. And so that's my religion. With regards to, let's say, the stuff you see in the Super Bowl, there's a inverted perverse Judaism. It's called Sabbatean Judaism. There's Sabbatai Zevi, I'm sure you know. He is a heretic messiah of the year 1666. And the stuff that you see in Eyes Wide Shut originated from him.
Right. I can recognize that. I mean, in your personal studies, when you say, I see this, is that what you're referring to? You're referring to, the satanic church that we can all kind of see as underlying our economic structure? Or are you looking at the economic structure and seeing another thing as being a deeper underlying religion?
I see. So there's a
those are branches of the same bird at some point, right?
Right. So there's a Sabbateanism. There's probably some kind of neo-Sabbateanism, which I don't have all the theory on, and we only see glimpses. And I think it's probably influencing the Federal Reserve and from their national structures, right? But there's things, a lot of people don't know this, but the front of my book is September 11th. Surprise. Because for me, that's the big wake-up call. Because when you understand that September 11th was the largest occult ritual in our lifetime, and that there's specific numerology involved in it, once I saw that, I was like, okay, well, if they're doing rituals on a big level, I need to understand the language of that.
Where were you on September 11th when that event happened in 2001?
Like in a middle school, I guess. Trading Pokemon cards. Yeah. So.
Well, yeah. So then I guess what I'm really getting at is, if you're trying to understand the language, then are you studying that Sabbateism, that Satanism?
It's hard.
Or is it the root that you're getting at? Are you starting at the very beginning up until those splits off?
It's hard to get those Sabbatean texts. I haven't been able to find them on LibGen, but you can get the precursor of Sabbateanism, which is Lurianic Kabbalism, and before Lurianic Kabbalism, there's the Zohar, and then before that, there's like the Bahir. So there's a lineage, and at some point, that lineage breaks off into Sabbateanism, which was excommunicated out of Judaism. There's Nathan of Gaza, who was Zevi's, I guess, big writer. But in order to understand him, you have to understand Lurianic Kabbalism, which I don't. And I'm suspicious I'm going to have to learn Aramaic to really get anywhere on it. So, in my book, like, I understand basic astrology, alchemy, and tarot. But to really get into the Kabbalism, I have to learn Aramaic, and I have to understand the Bible on a much deeper level, because when they speak through metaphors, and unless you know the metaphors, you're going to be completely lost. So that's what I'm finding.
That answers my question. Thank you.
Yeah, I feel like, there's people who were born into those families and they just get it for free. And the other thing is, what I understand about mainstream Judaism, or at least Chabad Judaism, is they just don't talk about, like, if you go up to a Chabad rabbi and you're like, okay, like, tell me about the Zevi guy. And they're like, well, he invented his own religion and that's that. Or, if you get too close to mysticism, you can get pulled into heresy. And a lot of, I think, like the Bahir says that and stuff like that. I might have gotten that wrong, but that the idea that if you get spiritually too high and you use these meditative techniques to talk to angels, there's a chance you're going to die. And there's a chance that you're going to be pulled off into heresy. But people are like, the Jews, as a Jew and as someone who's speaking with people who are high up, either I feel like they legitimately don't know. And I've been digging for that. They don't know. And it's at a higher level. And I think the people who probably know, this is my opinion, I think it's an uninformed opinion. I've been told there's secret Jewish texts that the Catholics have. And a lot of them speak very good Hebrew. So it's somewhere there. So it's kind of like, maybe there's like a classification system, right? And that some presidents have the rank to see it, and some don't. Like, you know, that people like Donald Rumsfeld and Dick Cheney and Bush Sr. Had access, or I was told, to whatever, but people like, let's say, Trump didn't. So there's some kind of secret rankings up above. That's what it feels like to me. And so the in-person route, it's not really yielding results. And so I have a team of people who dig through books, and the same way that I figured out psychoanalysis and Lacanian psychoanalysis and Deleuze, I'm hoping with enough people and enough reading, we can pierce the veil at some point. But I think it's going to take me 3 to 5 years.
So we started with Red Pill Talk on Reddit about 10 years ago or so. They have all sorts of vernacular and jargon and things. One of them being MGTOW, men going their own way. Did you go MGTOW to then read these books to then write a book?
Well, so this is something I'm going to advocate to you guys. If you get popular, if you do good to a lot of people, you're going to have the privilege of speaking to high-level people. Right. So in my heyday of the Red Pill, if I wrote an article, 60,000 people would see it. And then I always had an open door policy of come talk to me. Maybe I can help you. And so from there, I started talking to military officers, high level bankers, politicians, lawyers. And through those conversations, they started pointing me in that direction. And that's how I started going deeper and deeper. And that's how I knew where to look. With regards to MGTOW, that's mostly for men who got divorced, they got burned on a marriage, and they don't believe in marriage within an American context. For me, I never had those problems. I personally, did well with women. I grew up in the gym. I managed the gym, so I always had the speaking ability and the presence. But for me, what was interesting is, when Indian men would call me, or when African-American men would call me, or when Asian-American men would call me, for me, the challenge was, okay, well, how do I get laid as an Asian? How do I get laid as an Indian? Right. Right. So it's playing the game on a much higher difficulty. Right. So I went through and I studied psychoanalysis to figure out what is the process.
Are you meaning in their own countries? So you're doing it culturally specific? Both. Or do you mean in our country?
Both. So sometimes how to get, like, what does it mean to be a Chinese in Vietnam? Or what does it mean to be a second generation Asian? It's like spawning into a different level, right? And you call these people and you try and figure out, okay, like, what are the critical points, right? It's like a role-playing game, but you're playing with somebody else.
I want to clarify for people, GLO, that I'm pretty sure you're talking about your coaching business, right? Like you were getting enough traction with articles and online presence. Are you still coaching people now?
I'm still coaching people now. And
right. So just so the audience understands, that it's not just articles and writing. It's also offering a coaching offer to help people hold their frame, level up, whatever language people want to use for that.
So where my coaching business is different is a lot of people have a very high price point because they just want to get as much money as possible. For me, I'm an academic, I'm an intellectual, so I want to get to know my people. And my book is controversial because it talks about dating within the context of race, like Indian men, Asian men, because that's mostly who came to me. And because my prices are lower than my competition, I had more time with my clients and I was able to understand them better. So when you read my book, you're going to see a lot more depth because I spoke to Indians, let's say, for 300 hours, right?
Right.
And really for me, my grandfathers were very accomplished writers. And so I wanted to outwrite them. That was kind of like a personal challenge for me. So if you want to be a good writer, your writing has to be detailed. It has to be specific. And by pulling all this information in through my coaching business, I was able to write with depth and clarity. So I guess there's that. And then the other thing with regards to coaching is sometimes I would talk to people who have a crisis of faith, right? So let's say there's a Muslim who has a crisis of faith, or a Hindu has a crisis of faith, right? I did my best to figure out their religion and try and put them back on what I believe is their track. You know, whatever God made them to be, I don't believe in pulling anyone off of that track. So how do you make a Hindu a better Hindu? How do you make a Muslim a better Muslim? And, you know, I read the Bhagavad Gita. That's interesting. And I see elements of that in Kabbalism. I think there's I don't want to say who got inspiration from who, but it definitely rhymes. If you look at a Hindu system or a Jewish system, there's definitely similarities. I know if Jews heard this, they'd flip out. They'd say, we're monotheists. But I think there's some kind of connection through Persia, which was right in the middle and entered, you know, was a bridge between both cultures. Yeah.
So I watched the interview that you had with Anthony Dream Johnson, just because somebody dropped the link, because I wasn't aware of your stuff. And you guys covered a lot of interesting stuff in there about the grifting and the, you know, pretty much declaring that whole red pill manosphere space dead or desperately in need of a reboot. And I figured that's not a, you know, a bad place for, you know, for people that don't know you, who might be part of our audience, for them to understand that you are coming from that angle. You said some interesting things, in my opinion, about how a lot of the people in that space, they have this signature vibration about them concerning women, because really they're so consistently affiliated with women that would be considered whorish or slutty or whatever, you know, and that versus something not necessarily more traditional, but definitely not that vibe of sex as the main focus, you know, playing the chase game and all that kind of stuff.
I think so. From my research of the manosphere has always been adjacent to prostitution in some way. So for me, I find it morally repugnant. I'm against. But a lot of the PUA people would hire prostitutes, had sex with prostitutes.
What people?
Repeat
the PUA stands for Pickup Artist Community, Ben.
Okay.
Yeah, so a lot of them are.
You're not being a very good pickup artist if you're handing her a couple $100 to do it. I mean, anybody can do that. Well, I thought that was the fucking real easy road, right?
So I've had extensive arguments with them about this. You know, I agree. Yeah, if you're paying for sex, you're not alpha, nothing. You're just buying it, right? Like if you buy a hamburger, you're not a chef, right? But this is disgusting. But having spoken, you know, I've been on the internet for a long time. Having spoken to pimps, what they told me is a person who purchases sex will repress the fact that they purchased sex. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like a morbidly obese person. They will eat thousands and thousands of calories and then poof, it's out of their mind, right? And so that's how they are. So when a man has a sexual experience, he needs to talk about it with someone, because it's just, you need to release that energy somewhere. So a lot of the men in the red pill space have sex with prostitutes and pretend that they're sleeping with models. And so the way I figured this out is that there's different generations of women, right? There's Gen X women, there's millennial women, and there's the current Zoomer 20-year-olds. And they all respond to different stimulus. The Gen X women, the old PUA tactics were very long form. Millennial women less so, and Zoomers, they have no attention span. And so I would write about this and I'd be like, look, like the old stuff doesn't work because these women have a smartphone. And they're like, no, women are women, no, women are women. They're all exactly the same. And then I'd go through their comment histories and realize that they were having sex with prostitutes. That's one thing. The next thing you have to understand is, where does the idea of alpha come from? Like this, oh, I'm a macho. No. It is something that prostitutes feed those men. So if you're a prostitute, you have sex with men, but the problem is after you're done having sex with this guy, he's going to feel like a loser. Keep in mind, my internet experience, I talked to people who manage prostitutes. They told me this. Now, how do you make someone who pays you for sex not feel like a loser? You call him an alpha male. And so prostitutes are creating this alpha male behavior. So where does this misogyny come from? Prostitutes to make their clients not feel that bad. And, you know, I've written in that space for a long time. I've spoken to a lot of people. They've slept with prostitutes. So what is this? The next thing is when they say all women are whores, well, you sleep with prostitutes, so all the women you know are whores, right? And then finally, they have a very materialistic, atheistic outlook where they're vehemently anti-religion. It doesn't matter which religion, right? So if you go onto the red pill or any post-red pill space and start being a theist of any sort, they're going to say, oh, that's woo-woo, blah, 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 blah. And they're going to push you out like that. So you know that there are a lot of very powerful sexual rituals, and you know that a lot of the pornography has subliminal stuff going on in it. And there's a lot of spiritual warfare done through pornography because you can deeply influence people's minds when they're aroused, right? And a lot of magical practices have strong sexual elements in them, right? And that, if we're talking about sexual strategy, that has to go into it. If we're talking about traditional masculinity or traditional attitudes towards sex or pre-Christian views on sex, pagan views on sex, there's temple prostitutes, right? There's Aphrodite, there's stuff like that. But they're a hard enlightenment.
Well, you need to make the distinction of Roman paganism. That's not all paganism.
Well, I'm just speaking generally. I don't want to,
like the sacrament of marriage was in as a heathen. That was something that was very big, and that was something that was part of life. That specifically now what you're discussing is Roman paganism.
Well, I'm just saying that the manosphere discusses sex, and sex has been tied to religion for a long, long time. And especially when you're dealing with Indian men who are Hindu, mostly polytheistic, that's a big conversation for them, right? But let's say the hard atheists of the manosphere will never let you, they will deplatform you before you ever cross that threshold of speaking on any of these topics. So it's not that they, not only do they not believe, they viciously fight anyone who suggests an alternative. And even if that alternative, if you're a Hindu, you're born into it, it's also your race, right? You don't have anywhere to go. If an Indian man says, I'm not a Hindu anymore, you're still a Hindu. You still look like it, right? Or like if an Arab is considered a Muslim, even if they renounce, right? So a lot of the sexual conversations that I need to have to help, let's say, non-European men are completely purged from the manosphere. So that's, I don't know. So I guess
like above and beyond your advice given to the Western world, it's more so than that purged.
I'm saying, like, if you're in my position and you have men come to you who are different races and different cultures, you need to help them within their belief system, because it's not you trying to change a belief system, even if you disagree with parts of their religion, is outside of your bounds. You don't have clearance for that, right? So the next thing I want to point out is the internet is actually very Indian and very Muslim, right? So if you put yourself in this coaching role, you need some kind of cultural familiarity, and long term, you're going to need a religious familiarity. So that definitely pulled me into understanding different cultures, so I could help people within their culture.
I think that's wise, and I like that about what you've said so far. And I did listen to that interview as well. So my question is, if you could sum this up too, I would really like to hear your definition of what it means to be an alpha and what masculinity is. In your book, the definition of masculinity dives right into surplus and economics, which is very interesting to me. but I would like to hear you expand on those two definitions.
Okay, well, first of all, thank you for doing a good deep reading of my book. Like, I'm really touched. So really thank you for digging, because my text is deep in some parts. In what it means to be a man changes depending on which economic system we're in, right? So if we have a traditional view of masculinity, which is to say we pick a period in time and say that's what it means to be a man, you're holding on to a carcass effectively. So in order to create a family or provide a family, you need to understand in what cultural system you're in and which economic system you're in. And you need to play the game as productively as possible. So right now, we're ending the third industrial revolution, and we're moving into a fourth industrial revolution of automation and robots and ChatGPT and stuff like that. So if you want to afford the resources that will allow you to have a family and whatever cultural setup that is, you need to get ahead of that revolution. And I have a problem with conservatives because they're going to hold on to the vestiges of the previous revolution. And they're going to go down with the ship, effectively. They're going to hunker in a bunker and they're going to go down with the ship. So you have to understand that values are culturally and economically contingent. And as we move into new systems, those values will evolve into something different, right? So there's kind of a hardline neurotic behavior that you see in industrial societies that our great grandfathers had from working in a factory. And now we can call it Taylorism or Fordism. Then there's a post-Fordism, which is a 1980s like Lumberg office space culture. And you can see how masculinity evolves depending on which economic system you're in. So I want to say is, if you want to succeed as a man, you need to be ahead of the curve. What does it mean to be male? It means that you're chosen by a woman, and you're chosen by a woman for your success economically or sexually. But the game keeps changing. So to be a man is know which game is being played and change with the game. And so I know the manosphere is a conservative space, but in my eyes, it really, really shouldn't be. And my book talks about economic change and that you're either going to get ahead of this fourth industrial revolution or you're going to get plowed to death by it. Like, let's say maybe a lot of truck drivers are going to get plowed to death because they're not going to deal with that automation. They're not going to be able to reskill. Obviously, not everyone's going to make it. And from my vantage point, I just read books and explain them to people. But if you can get ahead of it, and if you're aware, you have a higher chance of making it. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you. I do appreciate the versatility that you're speaking of about men. And I do think that's pretty good advice, So yeah, thank you.
I know Marxism isn't welcome in the manosphere, but I'm a Russian, and so I'm well versed.
You're allowed.
And so there's Dave Harvey's Capital, and the manosphere likes to talk about the sexual marketplace, but they're economically illiterate. And I push Dave Harvey's Capital, and I'm like, you need to understand what its use value was, what its exchange value, and how commodities, including people, can be revalued as we move into different economic systems, right? I think everyone needs to have that conversation. And I know there's a lot of terms that are really, really unfashionable, but I would rather introduce people to unfashionable concepts than have them. One of my clients' fathers was a VCR salesperson, and he didn't switch over to DVD, and then he jumped in front of a train and killed himself. And so you need to get ahead of the change, and you need to be economically literate, so you don't end yourself or you don't fall into that kind of nihilism. I know that's a little dark, but sometimes people need that darkness to push them.
All right, it's a good example of extremely extreme people will remember. So.
Yeah,
I think go ahead, Rachel.
Please.
Oh no, I'll be right back. I have more questions, but I really do have to put the ducks to bed, so it'll take me a minute.
Oh, okay, ducks. I didn't hear that part.
It'll be just a second.
So we're talking about SMV, the sexual market value, and what is a high value man going into the fourth industrial
Well,
revolution.
let's have like a difficult conversation. So there's different men and there's different economic classes and there's different races, and we live in a multicultural society, right? So how you present is going to be dependent, right? And so I've encountered a lot of Asian and Indian men who try and imitate white men. And there's white men who try and imitate Asian men, and they come across as a strange knockoff. So it's important to say that, okay, like, what kind of car are you? And what are you selling specifically? And sell to that. You know, like, if you're a Toyota, say, okay, I'm easy to park. I don't break down. I don't require a lot of maintenance, right? You have to know what you are as a commodity and sell to that, and not try and put, let's say, monster truck tires on a Toyota. So
They
it's
would call it, in marketing, call it USP, right? You know, you need to know what your unique selling position is, and not
exactly.
try to go outside of it. You know,
You would think that in the manosphere they would have more economic conversations, because in the US, you know, marketing and sales is very, very well developed. But when you look through the red pill, it's barren. You know, where's all the theory? And they're so focused on hating on women. I get it. There's divorces, whatever. Your girlfriend cheated on you. I understand. But why can't we bring all the theory that I have, that you guys have, to help men out? You know, even if you've been burned, even if you feel bad, like, let's do our work as academics, please. And so I guess now I'm trying. I don't believe I'm changing my message. I'm trying to find a new audience who's more intellectually inclined. Yeah. I'm
so
really.
what's the main reason you felt like you got censored? I mean, Ben, if you were trying to pop in there first, go ahead, man.
No, go ahead.
I'm just curious. I mean, because, you know, did you feel like it was you were bringing for, you know, I haven't followed you, so I don't know well. So a lot of my questions are rudimentary that way of like,
Okay.
so you were bringing extensive articles, right? You were bringing a lot of meat and potatoes to the table. So, but then you're experiencing censorship. Did you feel like that was because people were feeling threatened and were personally taking it personal? Or was it the specific things that you were bringing to the table that they were like, this can't be here, you know?
Okay, so there's two things. The first thing is I grew up hating Hillary Clinton. You know, there's a whole ball, and so I had a chance to take my shot, and I directed the Red Pill audience. I led the largest Trump community on the internet, and I debated and defeated a network host. Her name's Samantha Bee. And so,
who's on Comedy Central?
Her career didn't pan out. I think her husband is doing better. But the Democrats had a game plan, and because this is the 2016 election was the first YouTube election, there were a lot of tactics that I knew from the Red Pill, from Reddit, from YouTube, that I brought into the election that the Democratic Party, with their, I don't know, millions or billions of dollars, wasn't willing to deal with. So they did basically like a network analysis, and they saw how the Red Pill affected the election by bringing out, let's say, conservative, disenfranchised men who normally wouldn't vote. And they're like, hey, yo, like, no, like, you can't be using our platforms to pivot in a way we don't like. That was a lot of it. And I think I was censored at a very high level on that level. The next thing is, what I believe is, when we're in a period of chaos, that's when social structures are the most malleable, and that's when it's the opportunity to really push. So you can say that you can make a lot of money when there's blood in the streets as an investor. That's true. But for my audience of 20-year-old males who are trying to get laid during the pandemic, all the social structures are weak. They can make a move. One of my controversial articles is on Ukraine. I think you guys read it. And it's to say that, look, like, these women are fleeing war zones. They're entering. You like it or not, you think the war or not. And that's an opportunity for you to, I don't know, to seek short-term relationships or long-term relationships, right? I don't control these men, but regardless, it's an opportunity. So a war is an opportunity economically, and it's also an opportunity sexually. And regardless of whether or not you agree with it, let's have that difficult conversation. And they're like, no, I don't want to have a difficult conversation. The reason why they don't want to have a difficult conversation is because for them, sex is a means of escape. It's a means of escaping from their job. It's a means of just escaping from their reality. And to say that reality has an impact on sex, that really, really hurts them. So they're like, well, no politics in the sex conversation. Well, politics and sex are always linked, right? So those two things banned me, like got me pushed out. And the other thing is, to keep a conversation fresh, you need to push, right? So like, let's say we're having an amazing conversation. If I come back on later, this has to be something completely different. We have to push, right? Like in bodybuilding, we need to challenge the body. And as a writer, as an artist, you got to keep pushing it forward. And they don't want to. There's disenfranchised men. They want to keep collecting paychecks from them, repeating the same stuff. So they want to minimize their labor expenditure, I would argue. So those factors, if that helps.
No, that's great, man. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
So in 2016, that was the year of the great meme magic war, frogs and Donald Trump and such. Were you involved with the meme magic at all in some way?
So those memes were first used against SJW feminists, and they SJW feminists and Hillary Clinton, it's the same people, same demographic. So I knew those tactics were going to work. So that's what we pushed in 2016.
So were you affiliated with the Donald? I mean, you said you were part of the biggest Donald Trump.
Yeah, the Donald.
Right?
Yeah. So I ran it.
Yeah.
So I was number 2.
Oh, interesting. I didn't. Okay, so that's yeah. I used to pop in there sometimes and look at what was going on. Long ago. So
they were constantly trying to ban us, and I was doing everything I could to skate that line of keeping you interested while not getting banned. And we ran it through the election as much as we could. And then they started posting against police, stuff like that, to really try and get the thing banned under a false premise. And that's how they were able to get rid of the largest gathering of, let's say, right-wing or anti-globalist voters.
So I don't remember what year, but I remember they did finally kill it. Go ahead, Ben. I was just saying, they did finally get rid of the Donald. I remember I didn't go follow the drama and the fallout, but I know that they did finally successfully Condé Nast finally green-lighted getting rid of it,
So our community, because we delve more into the occult community, for us, red pill and blue pill have a different connotation than what you're using. So for us, it's more of people that believe the mainstream story versus the people that look at the undercurrents of what's happening. And so you're talking about a different set of things. When you're speaking red pill, can you clearly define what the objectives of the red pill community are? And then further, can you define where your exact deviations from that prescription are?
Okay, so when you define the red pill, it's kind of like defining the United States of America, right? The United States of America is a different place depending on what time you're in, right? There's a Ronald Reagan America, there's an Obama America, right? And the culture shifts. So sorry, my chair's swiveling. So there is the early PUA manosphere where from in the 2000s, there's a lot of programmers that make a lot of money, and through their money, they need to figure out how to do family formation. And it's still mostly heritage white America. That's the early red pill. There's the early 2010 red pill where we're fighting SJWs. Okay. And so we're in a culture war. And then there is, let's say, the late red pill where it's political, it's parasitic, stuff like that. My deviation is I brought Marxian economics into it. I brought psychoanalysis into it. And so I brought a European continental analysis into the red pill. And that doesn't change the mission statement, but they are devoutly Kantian. They believe in ego psychology. They hate psychoanalysis, and they believe in Keynesian economics to the detriment of anything else. So they don't know about base and superstructure, nothing like that. For them, everything is very segmented. So just bringing in European systems of analysis, they don't want to know. They're not interested in that. The original focus of the community was to help those programmers get laid. The current red pill is focused on maintaining their celebrity status amongst dorks. For me, I think sex and dating and marriage is an interesting topic, and I want to discuss it economically, religiously, through every lens that I can find, because I think there's really fascinating conversations to be had. So my desire to dig more is more work than most of the creators are willing to do. So I price them out, right? So if you're in car detailing and you do a much better job than everyone else, you're going to make everyone look bad, right? So I make everyone look bad, and by pushing me out, they don't have to work as hard. So when is this? The next thing, kind of earlier to your question, when people enter into a relationship, that relationship is a precursor to how you're going to raise your family, right? And what kind of child you're going to create and what kind of culture you're going to bring into your child, right? So by making sure that a child is blue pill or holds on to globalist values, you create a future globalist, right? So since a lot of women are globalist leaning, one, they're not going to have children most likely. But two, if they do, they're going to be raised in globalist values. So I think that's where our definitions of red pill converge. I don't think the difference in our definition is as big as it might feel.
Yeah, the second half of what you're talking about does seem to be more aligned with our community a little bit. Again, especially where you're talking about politically, where but it's the dating crossover where that would be probably doesn't have anything to do with our community in any way, shape, or form. Now, when you say
I'm sure there are some people that are aware of it. You know, there's definitely young guys trying to get laid, and they're going to land on pickup artist information and that other red pill. You know, there was a pretty big documentary, wasn't there, that kind of changed. It moved the red pill from more of the matrix understanding, you know, to choose the higher truth, and then specifically narrowed it down. Wasn't it like a Netflix documentary or something that kind of pushed the definition over towards the dating? And
there's this woman, Cassie J, who I spoke to like 10 years ago. She was very nice. And there were a lot of these PUA people who, no, they weren't. There were marriage rights activists. And there were divorced dads that got burnt by the court system. And on a personal level, they were kind of boring. They didn't push theory. And I don't know, they were herbivores, I would argue, if I'm trying to be kind. And so that's what it started off as. But then, you know, I lift and I read, and me and my friends are aggressive. So we kind of chased them off, and we made the red pill have more fiery discourse. And they were just used to people agreeing with them. And then now what you see is there's Andrew Tate, who I think you guys know very well, has a career in promoting prostitutes. And before Andrew Tate, the prostitution online economy wasn't as centralized, and he has really cornered the market. So if I have to say something positive about Andrew Tate, is there are Romanian women who benefited from a lot of money because of him, and they can live lives. And that I don't want to fully defend him, and I don't want to fully attack him, but because of his social media presence, and because of his money, he was able to fully take things over because he has a very efficient, industrialized process. So now the manosphere is Andrew Tate de facto, because of how good his processes are, to the detriment of any other creator. So to kind of go back to, regardless of what your position is, your delivery system has to be the most up-to-date system. Otherwise, no one's ever going to hear you.
So I'm curious
yeah.
where you stand on homesteading and things like that, because we talk a lot about things that would be viewed as traditional on this channel. That's just because there are pagan values in there. That's what it means. It's pretty traditional. But in your book, it seems that your solution is to immigrate and work remotely, and which creates a completely different culture. So would you say that homesteading and things like that fall into an archaic way of being? Because it's very heavily promoted right now. It's kind of on trend, but it's also very dangerous to the system. So I think they're letting people do it, try and fail, and then reject it. But where do you stand on that? Like, what do you think about that?
What I feel is that the purpose of the United States is to crash and burn like a phoenix. And when you start reading Freemasonry, they are going to crash the United States. They're dead set on crashing the United States. And so I'm not against homesteading. I'm really afraid of living in the United States, because the same way the globalists crashed the Soviet Union, I believe they're going to crash the United States. So if you do homesteading in a country that the globalists have not decided on crashing, I think that's a good idea. But I think you might be able to blend in better in Latin America, because those countries the globalists are investing in. So so just if you look at how they designate the rural, let's say, right areas, they have a plan to edge you out, from what I understand, with water, with rights, with their federal agencies. Where Latin America is strong is their federal agencies aren't as powerful. And so it's a lot harder for them to do stuff like that. And the communities are a lot stronger, and they're less beholden to the federal government. The United States government is very powerful because Americans have gone to war repeatedly, and all of the tactics that they learned in war, they're going to bring it back. It's called the colonial boomerang, right? Latin America, from what I feel, from what I've seen, has less of that. So the government that I think is the scariest government is the United States government. So there's a lot of people who are homesteading, but just where are you homesteading and what's your political climate, right? Because when you call yourself a homesteader, you're taking a political position, and which government one is the most opposed to understands you the best, right? Because I have a whole discussion on how well can the government quilt you? How well does the government understand who you are? The better they understand who you are, the better they can fight you, right? So in the United States has very, very competent agencies who understand you very, very well, right? So obviously I know people in the federal government, they're very competent people. And they know everything that you're saying, and they know how you're saying it and how you're lying. I'm not saying you're not going to win, but they know what you're doing, right? They have files on you. There's Department of Homeland Security documents on whatever you're doing, whereas some of these countries are less advanced, and maybe you're going to be safe, maybe you're going to be not, but
You don't think that the lack of arms, though, in most of those countries is going to create an issue? Because that is the one advantage you got in America. No matter what a libtard wants to say, the American public, you can't just start murking the American public. That will get bad.
It's not about murking the public. They're going to slow grind you through water games. Like if you look at California, how did they get rid of the farmers? Did they shoot all the farmers? No, they played a water game, right? So they're going to be playing zoning and water and like wildfire games with you, and they're going to slow roll you out.
Jack Nicholson in Chinatown.
You know, exactly. So there's a whole water politics that they're going to play. I know they're playing water politics in Chile. So I'm not well versed in homesteading, but if you look at Deleuze, there's different kinds of warfare. And I think I discussed this in the book, right? There is a kinetic warfare with guns, right? Then there's an information warfare, right? Then we can talk about certain, how do I put it? Doom juice. Not going to say anything. It's mentioned in my book, right? So that's a new kind of vector for warfare, but there will be a water warfare. And in the Middle East, they do play water warfare. So just be mindful that that could be their primary vector for attack. And maybe they're not going to get you in your generation, but they might make it hard for your children to inherit the house so they can edge you out in that way, right? I know how much communism you guys have read, right? But there's a percussive game, but there's definitely legal games, and there's a lawfare that they can play with you, right? And they have a very robust lawfare vector. I know a lot of Americans have a gun fantasy, and the federal government knows you have a gun fantasy, which is why they're not going to come at you through the gun situation. One is this. Other countries understand that if you go to Latin America, they have certain rules on the books with regards to firearms, but the situation on the ground is completely different. Once again, I don't want to speak to that on camera, but from my time in Latin America, that's evident. So just understand that they have huge, huge think tanks. I've had the privilege through my Manosphere experience to speak to some of those think tanks. And there is George Reza. Hold on. Ooh. Look at you. So I have this book right here, Collapse. It's called Reza. His name is Reza Negrestani. So I think this is a good one for you. There's an article about how Iran under the Shah used manipulation of water to domesticate their nomadic population. Right? I don't know if you can see that. So, and the Shah was controlled by the CIA the whole time. So I think that's what they're going to do. So as a homesteader, maybe read that book and read how they transformed a population of nomads into city dwellers through water manipulation.
Do you have a favorite James Bond movie?
Favorite James Bond movie?
Mm-hmm.
Oh man. I have James Bond here. Sorry, I have everything. I just binge everything. I don't know if that's why you asked. My camera. So my I like the first Daniel Craig one.
Casino Royale.
Yeah, I really like the beginning. I really liked this return to a gritty James Bond. Mm-hmm. That was really good. But can you fuck with the camera? Sorry. So I mean, for me, what I like about James Bond is I like it's not so much. Oh, we did it. It's not so much about the story for me anymore, but I really like the costumes. I like the cars. I like how they put it together. So I kind of look for other stuff just because I feel like the American writers have been so exhausted that they really don't produce to the level that they did.
In terms of male role models throughout, history, the last few years with this franchise of James Bond, he was sort of the debonair guy. He had charisma. He could handle women. He was a spy. He had license to kill. He was a dangerous guy. And sort of that role model in film, is that dead now with the last film? They kind of killed the franchise. That sort of male is no longer going to be popular in that franchise.
I love this pivot. I think what happened behind the scenes is that they were using James Bond to recruit into federal agencies, right? So when you talk about James Bond, it's a film made by the US government for military propaganda, which they do really, really well. And I think the American population is really shifting. I know the combat arms are still white heritage Americans, but during the pandemic, they really pushed those people out. They pushed out a lot of my friends with that mandate, trying to speak carefully. Mm-hmm. So I don't think they have that same demand for the same kind of person.
Sure.
So
look at Mission Impossible and Jason Bourne, the American hero versus a British hero, but they're still kind of for a Western establishment.
Before they collapsed the Soviet Union, they were playing a lot of really depressing films about like alcoholics and orphans and stuff like that. And they really demoralized the Russian population. So I think before they really collapsed the US, with the collapse of the dollar, you might see a shift in the film as a form of psychological warfare, because that's what my parents experienced. So I would say, watch out for that. My family experienced one collapse, and George Soros actually participated in that one. So definitely watch for that. And that's why these strong, in Soviet cinema, there were strong heroes. There were people who were fighting for the rights of women in Central Asian republics, right? So those women didn't have to wear burqas. It's called like Sun in the Desert or something like that. And then those heroes started being pulled back, and the films got darker and darker and more depressing. So understand that they could manipulate that psyche through the films that they're doing. If you look at the latest Star Wars, they murder Luke Skywalker. It's a colossal wreck. So understand that those films are a psychological warfare that could be a vector.
Do you have any thoughts on the Dune franchise?
That's interesting. I like the art. I don't like, when I read Dune, I don't like it because he's too creative. Like he has his own terminology for everything. So in my book, I try and write for like a construction worker. I try and write a common man's language. And I think Dune is interesting as an experimental work that expanded the sci-fi universe. But,
Dune being kind of an inspiration that maybe inspired Star Wars and the franchise. And there's a lot of economics and economic warfare and the trade guilds and the spice being an important commodity. This type of thing might be interesting to men.
For me, that's interesting. I think Dune's interesting in that it opened up the genre, but I don't think he got the flavor profile correct, or at least for me, he didn't. So, but I appreciate the creativity, if that makes sense.
We've been asked to ask you about what your feelings on NASA.
So the space agency.
Well, I had a girlfriend who was a vehement flat earther, and I think the most convincing flat earth arguments are the flight patterns of I think it's like Australia to Argentina. They don't go in the direction that you think they would. So that's the most convincing flat earth argument I've seen. Some people believe the moon landing is fake because they needed to score one on the Soviet Union. So there's a lot of space warfare. I think in Hawaii they did a space laser allegedly, and allegedly there were California wildfires which were space laser. You know, I'm not saying any of this is true.
Well, the dues, anyways. Direct energy weapons is the theory, anyways.
It's Die Another Day. It's a James Bond movie plot.
Right. So there's a NASA military application. And so they're definitely doing stuff there. And there's definitely games there. So I think they're stealing a lot of funds and reappropriating them into black military budget. So in terms of deceit, that's something that, you know, if I had to point at something that's most likely true, it's going to be something like that. And then also there's going to be a fake alien invasion. A lot of people believe that. So maybe that's something that they're putting together.
Yeah, it's Werner von Braun.
Yeah.
Agenda.
You know, when you were on that interview with Dude, he started to ask you about your username, and it just kind of faded away. And so I'm still curious, just out of sheer curiosity and selfishness.
So what happened is, yeah, sorry to interrupt you.
No, go ahead.
Early on in Reddit, I had a troll account, and I would, you know, I chose like just the most obnoxious username of Gay Lube Oil because they're smuggling steroids into Australia. And I thought it was funny because I could post on leftist subreddits and right subreddits, and I would just I'd write stuff like my first article on Reddit was, I'm looking for lesbian dating advice. Hey, I'm a lesbian. I want to climb a palm and collect dates, and I don't know how to do it. And I posted this to a bunch of lesbians, and I was curious, like, are they gonna like address me as a lesbian or like as like a fruit collector? And so, you know, I was like 22, and so I wanted to cause problems. And then later on, like, there's all these people who took themselves super seriously, and I'm like, you're talking about sleeping with women, so whatever. And
our video background, for those who don't see it, is the actual lube oil. It's the pink lube oil, meaning it's the gay lube oil background that we have on our stream tonight.
Yeah,
and what you said, I think a lot of people probably don't have the deep meme lore of knowing that was it in New Zealand or Australia? Some guy, you know, he received a package. It was steroids. They wrote gay lube oil on that thing, and so then his mother fell under the false belief that he was a homosexual because he was trying to get steroids. Right? I think that's it.
Yeah. So you know, I've been in the gym bodybuilding community for a long time, and obviously they all sell steroids. And so one of the hardest places to receive steroids is Australia. And there's a lot of games that they play. Like they'll hide it in routers, they'll hide it in creams, because Asia's right there. Yeah. And so there's a huge, you know, they can make the steroid raws in China, and they really want to send them to Australia. And so in the bodybuilding steroid community, which is synonymous, I think you guys know, they've been getting increasingly more and more creative. And so for me, it started off that way. You know, I'm heterosexual. I made a troll account, you know, back in the day.
Right.
There were a lot of troll accounts, and I never switched. And I would, you know, like, I've been kicked off of Reddit because I like to troll, and my articles are trollish, even though they have a lot of truth in them. So that's how I got my username. But yeah, that's my.
No, thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah,
that's
perfect.
that's pretty damn funny.
Yeah, thank you. I'm glad you appreciate it. I think Rachel had like more questions for me, and I was really curious. I was really curious because I'm expanding more into a female audience now, and I know that my book is experienced differently by women. I also know that women love my writing because it's thrilling, and it is a type of erotica at times too. So I'm just curious, like, how do, obviously I'm writing mostly for 20-year-old males, but I am curious how you experience it.
Yeah, I don't mean to backtrack because we've gone down some really fun holes here. But yeah, I mean, initially, I can tell that it's not written for me. I do find the humor and I can giggle about it. I do get, the snark is entertaining. The art's beautiful.
Thank you.
You do get really deep further in, which is something I noticed. I was like, wow, this is gritty, heavy philosophical stuff, which is nice. So most of my questions, do want to pin down exactly, without the comedy and all that, just like really nailing down your definition. So I've asked some of those questions
Okay.
already. I think after listening to your interview, I was curious about your upbringing, because I
Okay.
think that really plays into a lot of how we perceive the world. So you mentioned that you were born Russian, and at what point did you come to America? You mentioned growing up in a lot of those communities, fourth generation immigrants. So I think my ancestors may or may not have had similar, very different experiences than you. Some of them could find community, some of them could not. So, how did that shape your views on what's masculine and what's feminine? When you're approaching people who are betas or all of that stuff, this is how you perceive the world. So, and it's like you're saying, talking to people specific to their culture. So I'm curious about yours.
So Russian women are very strong, at least Soviet women, because there were Soviet snipers, there was female doctors. They really gender integrated women, and my mother's a very strong woman, and I think a lot of Russians and Eastern Europeans have this from their mother. They'll tell you that I came to this country and you better do, really, really well. You better get good grades. I didn't bring you to this country for you to be a loser, right? So I was expected to do really well academically and to fight to the top no matter what. And so in school, I fought to get good grades, and in my writing, I fight into a grittiness, and there is a Russian grittiness of a hyper realism where I feel like Americans have a more romantic notion of sex, whereas if you start watching Russian movies, you're going to see this hyper realism. And if you look at my writing, it's very direct. And if you guys know any Eastern European languages, you know that Eastern Europeans are more direct as a culture. So that directness is shocking to an American audience. It's almost like a Fight Club vernacular. So when people read me, I believe I am grammatically correct, and I don't believe I have an accent. But the way I put together sentences is hyper direct, and that is because my first language.
It's a Germanic versus Latin thing. So the Latin languages are the Romance languages. They're very flowery. They're also very deceptive. The Germanic languages, which the Rus Vikings are a derivative of the Germanics. That was the Rus Vikings were the Varangian guards, and then Russia was given to them as payment for their good service as the Varangian guards. And so this is all a Germanic derivative, even though the languages don't resemble that much, with their actual words currently.
Yeah, so the first rulers of Russia were Norse, right? So I guess to my style, what I want to talk about is there's this man, Paul Virillo. He's a theorist. He talks about speed, and through speed is traumatic, right? So if you move too quickly, you can die, right? You can fall off of a motorcycle. Well, when you're in the dating sphere and you are going on a lot of Tinder dates, like I did in my 20s, and you're going to all these houses, there's the act of sex itself. I think that's more or less universal, but there's going and seeing the destitution and figuring out what's this woman's life by what's on her counter, and getting a massive experience like that is very gritty. And in the manosphere, I felt like they papered over it. But what I wanted to do was say, well, look, this is my 20s. This is what I experienced in Los Angeles. It was gritty. and someone needs to talk about it because it's the experience of my generation, right? And so in the pursuit of sexual maximization, it's inevitable to get a certain level of grittiness, and that's the experience of my friends, and that's the experience of my clients. And whether or not it's good or bad, I think it's important to convey that, because it's a story that should be told. And I know it's hard for people to look at it, but there are consequences to having a lot of sex, and there are a lot of consequences to hookup culture, and it is that darkness. And when you look at the astrological attributions of my postmodern sex chapter, you're going to see that darkness, and you're going to start seeing these darker attributions. And so I don't want to make a moral call of whether or not someone should or should not do that, but understand that they will take, their soul will be impacted from engaging in that. And there's obviously benefit from overcoming that. But I think that's something that should be put in print. And I want to push my book, and I want more people to address that. So when you look at Russian media, I know a lot of it's propaganda, but there's a lot of grittiness. And I think the American audience can benefit from that grit. America has a Protestant culture of sweeping things under the rug. I think there's a lot of stuff under the rug in the United States. I think it's going to start sliming out. So I think let's look at things as they are, even if it's painful. Because I think things are going to start shifting very quickly the way they did during the pandemic. And the more honesty we can have right now, the better things are going to be. You know, my generation, I believe, is damaged from that hookup culture. A lot of women my age are very bitter. You know, some women could handle it, some women can't handle it. But dating at that speed has a strong psychological effect, which if you're not equipped, if you don't have, I believe, a high verbal IQ to process it well, if you don't have friends and family that are going to process it well, it will be trauma for you. And so I know you read this, and I know how my grittiness affects women, and I think you're very polite to me. And I think there was a secret unstated question, but what I want to say is there's a certain grittiness, and thank you for bearing with me. But I think ultimately it's good. It's medicine, and we need to start having these conversations.
I appreciate that. And I do appreciate getting real and being gritty. That's something that I really like. I've been around all kinds of different circles of people. So, I mean, I find that kind of thing actually a little bit attractive, because it's at least attempting to be real. You know what I mean? And maybe not everybody in those circles are real, but they're trying. So then, you know, something that I'm curious about is, you know, if you understand how the system is working, and working against people, and how the culture is setting people up really to have relationships that don't work. You know, it's like, you know, in the interview, we're talking about, you know, and granted, you've talked to a lot of people who deal with prostitutes and all that stuff. And you go to the bar and there's all these gold diggers, right? But, you know, I was talking to Jim earlier, and it's like, this is what humans do. How do you meet people? You go to a local event. Our current culture has you going to bars, you know, and I've had artist friends who are like, well, how do I meet women? And it's like, you're going to have to go to the places you want to be with that woman. You know, you go to an art show. Is it awkward as heck to start a conversation with a stranger there? Absolutely. But that's where you go. So unfortunately, our culture has made it so that if you want to find anybody, you go to the party scene. And those are not people that are into anything long lasting. But unfortunately, that's what ends up happening. You know, so you have these girls and they're not trying to gold dig. Sometimes I really hate that term, but it's because it's totally natural for women to look for somebody to be supportive and be in partnership with. So, you know, of course, there are women who you know, see that very differently. But, you know, do you have compassion for that? Because our systems really put people into a very tight place.
Well, so I think the dollar's declining, right? And so in order to start a family, which is what I think a lot of women are looking to do or really want to do, regardless of whether or not they're ready to admit that, there has to be a certain income, right? You can't buy a house under a certain income, right? You can't support a family under a certain income. And if that's a woman's goal, she needs to look for men like that, right? So are they gold digging like that? Next, on the male side, there's a lot of financial insecurity. And so that's going to get projected right back out at women, right? So I guess that, for me, yes, I went to law school, but I grew up in the gym. I grew up as a personal trainer, then managing a gym. So I've never felt gold dug because I don't dress that way, right? So if I guess rural women like me, right here in Mexico, very, very rural women like me, traditional women who grew up on a ranch, stuff like that. So that's not my personal experience. And I think that in order to be some Hegelese, if women perceive you in that way, you probably did something to do that perception. So it's a back and forth. And are women looking to be bailed out? Yes. I think women were tricked into a lot of bad degrees that aren't paying the way they used to. So yes, women are looking for bailouts, but so is every corporation. So whatever problems you're going to see at the dating level, you're going to see at the other scales as well, right? So I guess I don't know what state you're in, and when is this? The other thing is, I grew up in Los Angeles, and the dating we did really wasn't the bars or clubs. It was the hookup app, industrialized dating of meeting up with people who you're sexually attracted to, but you have zero compatibility with and maybe zero language with. And it was this industrial process of, I went on a date with this person from completely different class, and it was just people being shot at each other by algorithms, and not really understanding who this person is, except for scavenging what's in their bedroom, what's in their bathroom, right? And so on one hand, that's dark, but on the other hand, it's kind of like a commodity discovery of who did I have sex with? That's partially my experience. That's the experience of my friends. And I really, really wanted to tell that story because I know that online dating scene is being eroded. And I had the pleasure, or maybe the displeasure, of being right in the forefront of it. It's not the glory days anymore. And I just wanted to put it into writing. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
So
John Waters that talked about the bookshelf.
Some of your points, you kind of seem to be on two sides, where like you're talking about, and I agree with the part where you're saying that the hookup culture has had a real bad mental impacts on folks. But then also, do you teach hookup culture?
I mean, for me, like, I'm a mercenary. You know what I mean? So if you come to me and you ask for something, I'm going to explain how you get it. And at the end of the day, I think it's their moral choice. I don't want to be, I'll say, look, like, this is what you do. This is how this is played. And so there's different men at different stages, right? And it's, I went to law school, and you defend good people and you defend bad people. And for me, the rush is the process. I love the process. So I would say, like, in a sense, I'm an instrument. Maybe I have moral culpability. But for me, I love binging information. And so it's, I have a whole section on work. I have some very dark sections. And in order for me to have those dark sections, I have to talk to unsavory people. So unsavory people give me good stories, and I've dealt with these unsavory people, and now you could read those stories. So to get that information, you do have to talk to those people. Obviously I'm online. There's some separation between me and them, but they're really dark, and they can have a very negative psychological impact on you. But it's like, if you're a doctor, like if you want to see the most interesting diseases, you have to be in the middle of it, right? If you want to see the most interesting parts of the culture, the most negative parts, if you want to be on the front lines, right, you got to expose yourself to that. So I'm curiosity driven, I'm information driven. And does that put me in contact with gritty people? Yeah. And I think that's something I've taken upon myself. And maybe that's the correct decision. Maybe it's not. I hope it makes an interesting book. Yeah.
The
So
chat.
what would you say? Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
The
Ben.
chat has pointed out. So they're asking for a delineation with your religion, because there's born Jewish, but Jewish is a religion. It's not, you could be born of that same region and choose a different religion. So that's a religious choice. But then also there's the mitochondrial aspect of it. Has to follow through your mother's line. So people are asking for clarification. I believe they want to know, A, if it comes from your mother's line, so you follow the mitochondrial path, and then B, if you religiously are practicing.
Well, so I got the mitochondria, and racially, I have a Russian father and a Jewish mother, so I'm a lot bigger and stronger than my purebred Jewish cousins, and I think a lot more aggressive. But that's what they tell me. But for me, I like to dig intellectually, and in Judaism, there's a lot to dig through. And sometimes it goes into a dark path, and a lot of times the Jews argue with each other, but there's a lot of stuff to dig. And I see a very academic religion, which is intellectually very fulfilling for me. But I don't, in terms of practicing, I avoid pork, and I try not to do anything on the Sabbath. But I guess there's a lot of brilliant texts that I really, really like. And because Jews have been isolated from Christian society because they grew up in ghettos, and because they were excluded from a lot of work, they had a lot of time to develop these rich texts, right? So I know that Christians wrote very negative things about Jews, and I know that the Talmud has a lot of very negative things about Christians, but every culture has written very negative things about everyone else, and that negativity is what holds these cultures together. And I think both religions are defined by their antipathy towards the other. But what I will tell you is, if you're European, you are partially Jewish, 100%. Some of your ancestors converted.
Absolutely not.
Well,
Not.
if you're, it depends on who. If you're Italian, yes. If you're any kind of Spaniard, yes.
I won't disagree with that. If you're Northern European, absolutely not. If you're of Germanic descent, absolutely not.
Okay, it depends. Okay, so if you're Scandinavian, then no. And so how about this? There's a lot of people who have Jewish ancestry. There's a lot of people.
You even understand, you're into these kind of things. The motherfucker gene, right? That's not that's only expressed in extreme Northern European people, because we're our own people. You're
definitely your own people. I was thinking about, like the areas that I grew up in. But if you're from the frozen north, no, listen, no Jew wanted to open a bank there, so I think you're pure. No one wanted to sell you a credit card or jewelry. You weren't worth it.
Gold major curse. We get it.
And you're really combative. So to get you to sign up for loans, it's just not going to work.
We are.
But
Rejected.
I think if you're Mediterranean, then you're going to find that.
There's a higher chance there.
Sorry, I misspoke. And
French and English too. I mean, anything European, the Jews married into the royalty to kind of solidify and expand their position. And so then that's why you can't separate the Jews from the English people, and you certainly can't separate Freemasonry from Kabbalism, because it demanded overlap at some point,
So what I'll tell you is there's different Jews, right? So there's African Jews, there's Middle Eastern Jews. My ancestors lived in shacks in the outskirts of Ukraine for hundreds of years. They were isolated, and then at some point they integrated with the broader Russian community. So there's how do I put this? First of all, I'm not here to defend anyone. Every culture is going to, there's going to be Cossacks and Crusaders, and there's going to be the Jewish counter reaction. So in history, there's all sorts of everything. And what I would say is, unless you're like our purebred Northern friend, you don't know who your ancestors were or what they did. And the truth is usually a lot more complicated than you think. So you might have negative views, and I understand that, and I'm not discounting that, but just understand that especially in Central Europe, there's a lot of mixing. So, and the other thing within Kabbalism, you're going to see a lot of Greek ideas, and there's the line between Jew and non-Jew, especially in Europe, isn't that clear a lot of the time. But what I'll say is it is a delicate conversation, and
it's an interesting one.
Yeah.
And once again, it requires the delineation. So when you look at it in its origins, it's an Abrahamic religion, which is a religion of the Hebrew people. And then specifically when you look at it, then at one point in time, to at least be one of the God's chosen people, you needed to specifically be of Hebrew lineage. Then at some point in time, it got transferred over into where it just became, while Judaism is the religion of the Hebrews, at some point in time, other cultures started coming into it. There are a lot of theories out there that would say in order to be sacrificial lambs, because then they're not true Jews, and you have the wheat before the chaff, and that way they can be sacrificed, and you get to keep the chosen ones as the good ones. And so then there was a religious release where you could join the religion without the Hebrew blood. And somehow that happened. Now I understand where that happened in Christianity, because Jesus supposedly said the Gentiles were now of the same covenant as everybody else. Whereas in Jews, that person has never come that made that covenant. And Jesus is somebody, which I'm not a Christian, so don't take any of this as something I'm taking a piece of, bro. I'm an Odinist. So the Christians then had that story, but the Jews never had that covenant where the Gentiles were allowed to actually become one of them. So this becomes very confusing. And then further, when Israel in the 40s, when Israel became a nation, now the nation becomes Jew in and of itself. And so if you say anything about that, about the actions of Israel in and of itself, you're attacking Judaism. So it becomes an extraordinarily confusing subject, especially when some folks, and I do understand what you were saying, that there are divisions inside that religion. I get it. And that there are the folks that own the media, they help propagate that confusion.
I guess what I'll tell you is, it's going to feel like I'm pivoting, but I'm not pivoting. It's that at least the European Jews, the Ashkenazi Jews, the religion is very literary and there's a lot of reading, and we're known for our high verbal IQ, right? So if verbal IQ is your strength, you're going to play to it. And I've chosen to play to it by writing you a book that I hope you guys enjoy. But I know members of my race are going to be playing word games with you guys. Sometimes maybe to their own benefit, maybe to their own detriment, right? So if the cards you have is verbal intelligence, you're going to be predisposed to manipulation because that is your strength, right? So when members of my culture or members of my race do that, understand that let's say if you're an African American and you have a very long femur, you're going to be good at basketball, right? Hopefully that's okay for you too. Or maybe if you're Asian, I'm trying to be careful. If you're Asian and your ancestors had to figure out irrigation, you're going to be good at math because you were genetically selected, right? My ancestors genetically selected on who could understand scripture the best, regardless of if you guys agree with it. So the cards that my race has is high verbal. So when they play games with you and accuse you of stuff and do all of that stuff, that's the main card that they have as a culture. And whether they're right or maybe they're wrong, you know, it happens both ways.
Through deception, we get it.
I understand.
Magic.
But that is the strength and that is the advantage, and you got to play whatever cards you have, and that's what they're going to be doing. So,
well, like you said, your half blood, half relatives are not exactly the most beastly. They're probably not going to be doing no direct charge on the shield walls today.
Yeah. So you know, I have ancestors on both sides of the racial conflict, of the race war, the culture war. So you know, my parents chose to put me in this position through their union, and so I do my best to try and navigate it, because if I pivot too hard in one direction or the other, then I'm shitting on one half of my bloodline or the other half of my bloodline, right? So
yeah,
that's where I'm at, and
kind of an internal battle going on in you.
Look, you know, my parents chose to have me. Here I am, and I have to play these cards. So I understand your sentiment, and I know there's a lot of friction on both sides. But
actually didn't mean to grill you on this at all.
I
don't even know where the fuck this came out of.
Yeah, right? I just trying to answer every question openly and honestly to foment an interesting conversation. But
yeah, we appreciate it.
And I'm also trying to answer, you know, the big J question in a way where you guys are monetized, and but just
we're
just
not
understand.
monetized. We'll never be.
Okay.
But yeah, very well.
We're back up everything on Rockfin, because we're not particularly politically correct. I'm not. If you haven't noticed, while I don't hold some of your positions, and we haven't fleshed some of them out completely. I don't know how much time you're willing to dedicate to this tonight. We actually, Marcus and I have another show that we'd like to invite you on that is more of a debate style show. And that you can stay as long as you want today, though. We're not kicking you out either.
Okay.
Just trying to say you've been here 2 hours. Most of the time, most guests at around 2 hours start petering out. And
it's from bodybuilding, you know, like it's
the endurance.
I have tremendous endurance, and I used to train 6 clients one after the other and just keep loading them up with barbells. And
there you go.
And one of the things I believe is that in order to, you know, you guys were playing Rammstein before, right? So Till Lindemann is in amazing shape even at his age.
Yeah.
And the reason why his art is at such a high intensity is because his body is at such a high level. So I think you guys read my book, you know that it's at a high intensity, and I was only able to achieve that by being in very good shape, and that's why I can give you guys my time like this without melting. Yeah.
Unfortunately, Rachel and Jim have had access to it. Marcus and I and Sean have not yet, but before we get you on the next show, they're going to pass it along so that way we can look at it and also be more informed on what you're thinking and how you're viewing the world. I would like you to expand more. You've spoken financially. Obviously, given your attitude and the way you carry yourself, financial cannot be your only qualifier for alpha male, because obviously some cuck with working on a computer is making vastly more money than, like you said earlier, you're writing for the construction worker and things like that. So what would your other qualifiers then be?
Well, so the thing is, when you talk about money, right, there's exchange value of what you can sell something for, and there's use value of how much value this object creates, right? So our economy doesn't, this is a Marxist point, doesn't reward use value the way it used to. I think industrial capitalism really did. So there's a lot of men who, regardless of how much money they're moving in, right, they do create a lot of use value. If you're a housewife and you make big dinners for your family, you're creating a lot of use value, even though that's not reflected in the GDP, right? So I think human beings can sense value, and values different culturally, if that makes sense. And so I think if you're producing a lot of value in whatever historical or cultural context you're in as a man, I think that's good, even if the current dollar economy doesn't reflect that, right? So if you're back in your homesteading, maybe you're not making any money, but you could be making a lot of use value. Does that?
Thanks for clarifying that. Yeah, that was something I was trying to get at earlier. So perfect.
Cool.
They're asking about your age. I want to say born in 1988, 89.
Oh yeah, you got it. Yeah, I was born in 90, but yeah, you got me.
Right on.
Yeah. So, cool. What's I can't see what chat's asking. So whatever they're asking, I'd be so curious to answer that.
That's why I've been I'm trying not to disrupt you, but also trying to occasionally flash him up on the screen so you can see him without being too disruptive.
I can't see the screen at all.
You're speaking. Oh, wow.
My eyes are for reading books. They're not for like hunting it. They're book eyes.
Mm-hmm.
So whatever. Let me answer a couple more questions and then.
Yeah, if chat has more questions and they want to put in more questions now.
Okay, perfect. Can you just read them to me?
You were talking about cards earlier. Did you have specific tarot decks that you work with or have learned?
Okay, there's the Aleister Crowley deck.
And
then there is Liberty Tarot of the Stars Eternal. And the symbols are a lot easier to see because the woman who Aleister Crowley, I think, drove to suicide, she does it in this very stylistic way. But in Liberty Tarot deck, it's a lot clearer. And the tarot deck in Aleister Crowley, I think, is the Sabbatean demonic one. So when you read Aleister Crowley, or if you read it, be careful because he could be tricking you into all sorts of incantations. I think
Golden Dawn does that same thing.
Well,
yeah,
Crowley definitely switched designations on some of the cards and inverted some of the meanings.
No, Crowley didn't switch them. Ryder and Waite switched them, and fucking Elias Levi. You can't mix that up. Crowley actually put the order back into place. That is Crowley's order, is the original order when Rider and Waite.
You're right. I forgot about that.
And then Elias Levi also is the one who first tied the Kabbalistic tree to the tarot and put the steps of the Kabbalistic tree to the tarot. That included an inversion between the number 8 and the 11. And really, it made it from a 3-part process to a 2-part process that's more polarized, more of a polarity rather than a trinity.
Have you guys seen there's Gershom Shalom, Sefer Yetzirah, and Bahir?
Yeah, I've got it over here behind me somewhere.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, because for me, like, that was the clearest. I know there's different interpretations and stuff, but there was, what I liked in the Sefer Yetzirah is you understood every Sephirot from the verses in the Bible. And like there's Vav, which is like he divided between light and darkness, and that's Hierophant, because the Hierophant divides between light and darkness. So in my digging through tarot, Sefer Yetzirah was really good because it tied it back into the Bible. And so I viewed that as a definitive source. I don't know how you guys do it, and I don't consider myself an expert, but I think that really helped me trying to figure out what was going on.
You get into Garrett Knight, Kabbalistic symbolism.
Okay. I have, do you guys have meditation? Do you know about this book right here? Meditation and Kabbalah. This one?
Aryeh Kaplan.
Yeah, Ari Kaplan is really good. And there's number squares, and there's very powerful meditative techniques, which are dangerous because they could really bring you up very quickly. And you can get kind of like a roller coaster feeling. So if I think the procedure, once again, I'm not an expert, I could be getting a lot of things wrong, I'm just starting to dig, is you're supposed to rotate shapes and construct this chariot while you're reading your Jewish prayers. And there's also number squares and number combinations that you're supposed to be doing. So if you can read your prayers while doing the number squares concurrently, I think there's some kind of resonance, from what I understand, that puts people into a deep meditative trance. And I think that's a very big secret. There's this esoterica guy. He's like he's Jewish, but he really digs. There's a channel, it's called Esoterica. And
Justin Sledge's channel.
Yeah, I really like him.
Mm-hmm.
And what I like about him is I know this topic is very delicate, and he's able to provide a lot of information while being delicate and while being respectful, because there's a lot of landmines in the space.
So have you looked into the Doth side of things then yet, where you are integrating the Doth tree into the standard Sephiroth setup?
I'm not like that good, like I'm trying to figure out the foundations, and so the other thing is in Christianity, there's usually like a path that's a lot clearer, but Jews love to argue. So it's just a constant fight of Jews fighting other Jews in Aramaic. And so there's just a lot to sort. And then when I go to look for external resources, there's just another layer of confusion, right? So
no, I posted that definition in the chat where you're talking about it. Pill pull,
yeah.
The word pill pull is a word that describes Jews arguing back and forth in the Talmud. And it's not always straightforward. Everyone's prone to sophistry and trying to get their position across, whether it's completely straight ahead or not. And the Jews are the best at it, period.
I would say is when you're excluded from most of society, the way Jews were, that's a sport. Jewish arguing is a sport. And
right.
so
the Irish also, they just like to get drunk before they do it.
So they just, it's if you have a high verbal IQ, it's just something you're going to enjoy, right? So, but it's for me, I got the basics. I figured out the tarot. I figured out astrology. I figured out alchemy. I started. I think there's Julius Evola. I've been reading his alchemy. He's definitely very anti-Jewish. So if you look at the text behind me,
Wait, hold on, who?
I got
Evola.
Evola, yeah.
Evola?
Yeah, I got him over here on my bookshelf.
Well, anti-Jewish is in far as Christian. Okay. All right. Never mind.
Well, I mean,
okay. I get it. I wasn't inside your duality. I get it. It's all right.
I'm sorry. I wasn't really trying to construct a duality in my maybe.
No. I that's my fault. And
Okay.
I get it. Where you're coming from, that is where most of the Western world is. So I'm just not there. So that's my fault.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
You're good.
We're at a 3-level.
Yeah, that's
we're at a
not-
3-level
Okay.
bar.
Oh, sorry. Sorry.
So
Yeah.
so we have some viewers who are probably just joining us now, and some of them are like 101 basic, getting into it. Some are into 202. Now we're having a 303 and a 404 level conversation.
Okay.
So we're navigating all of these types of viewers, and maybe let's circle back and say this is GLO, GLO, and he's
Hi.
written the book, The Pillars of Wisdom. Jim and Rachel have a copy there. Hold it up there for you. And if you lift it up and you set it down, and you lift it up and you set it down, and you do that a couple times, you get stronger. So that's your first bodybuilding lesson.
Perfect.
It's a reps
Our
in with
other,
your
just
pillars.
to let you know, our other show is not occult based, so it would be more of the other subjects. So I actually didn't even know you were into going to speak occult, and you honestly waded into the deep end of the pool for the occult. Like, this is like legitimately our specialty. We study this all the time. Most of us for 20 plus years. So I apologize. We didn't even know that this was going to happen.
Well, so I've been calling the people who bought my book, and so if you buy my book, I'm going to call you and we're going to talk. I'm going to see if you like it. And most of my red pill readers, all of my stuff has astrological attributions at the top, and a lot of my guys are programmers, and they just didn't see it. And I'm like, it's every image. It's every image.
It is.
I have like Kali from the Kali Yuga. Like, I got the Wheel of Fortune. Like, I have the Empress. Like, I have a full tarot card deck that's in your house. And they're like, yeah, I just didn't see the astrology. And I'm like, I have astrological distributions in the back. Like, nope, I just didn't see it. I'm like, but how?
It's like I noticed it right away.
I mean, it's like
why,
in big
that's why
bold.
memorizing symbolic literacy and then corresponding one system to another is so important, because there's a whole, like, the richer, greater realm that we exist in, and not the invisible one, like the one you're actually in. This shit's in front of you all the time. The great big umbrella on the side of the bank fucking means something, folks. It's not just an umbrella they chose, like, hey, let's use some clip art. We'll slap an umbrella on the side of this skyscraper that's coincidentally 33 stories or whatever. It's around you all the time. We're waiting in it all the time.
So I've been calling people because I'm like, okay, well, I felt like I've written something different, something very interesting. I want to see, how do they experience it? How do women experience it? How do different cultures experience it? But the symbols, they can't see them. And
just start.
Be more blunt about it.
You could do a whole 400 pager of just symbols, and they're gonna be like, yeah, I don't know. I'm like, yeah, how? But so if they're not meant to see it, they're not gonna see it.
Language is simple. When the man understands the language of symbolism, the world will open up to them. Manly P. Hall.
Well, I'm trying to give them the language of symbolism, and they can't see it. So
no, this is why you have, when I was talking to you at the beginning, where I was talking about the difference between exoteric and esoteric. And then I further explained that the exoteric is needed because the mundane, no matter how much we want to make everybody into this Atlantean society where everybody's enlightened and they all have interest in becoming greater people and absorbing knowledge. The fact is most people just don't. They don't. They want to get their pecker touched. They want to punch out a couple kids like them, eat some hot supper, and go to bed in a warm place. That is the end of their wants. And we can't make them want more. So you have to keep an esoteric level or an exoteric level, which is entertaining. And so that way the vulgar masses will carry that message on. And then the person with the esoteric mind will then be able to derive them nuggets of gold out of this story that's only being used as entertainment amongst others.
Yeah, I knew this, and thank you so much. That's an amazing point. And I knew this and I was told this. I just didn't understand that you could hand someone like a book of symbols and they're like, yeah, I didn't really look at the images. I'm like, it's every other page. So
I will tell you, you'll probably have better luck with women discussing symbols. That's your high priestess card, because women overthink everything. We look for deeper meaning. It's part of how we're genetically wired. So, I mean, that's why all these movements of like baby witches and like all this stuff is so trending, because it comes naturally. It's so easy to market to. It's so easy to harness. It's so easy to control because it comes naturally. And there's been long periods of time where it hasn't been expressed or repressed, or, I mean, I can't tell you how many women are like, daughter of the witch you forgot to burn, or whatever, like. Well, but I mean, I think that's, if you're going to really market to women, using that symbolic language is smart, because that's something that I noticed in the art almost right away and was like, oh, okay, I can look at this through a different lens now, and I can see it now. You know, like I think 175 was a page that I turned to, which was really fascinating to me, the Eat or Be Eaten, because it ties into other stuff I wanted to talk to you and Ben with.
I like 175 because I was interested in, Leviathan and Behemoth, and really the primordial entities.
Immediately. I was also
drawn that up again, Rachel.
Image. Yeah, I put a picture of it in our chat, so if we could screen share it, that'd be easier.
Yeah, we'll get to that. But
it does have the symbol for Mars and Gemini, which I think is fascinating, because I like that combination. I think some people would not. But so here's the thing with that chapter. I found it a little bit polarizing in terms of slave and master philosophy.
From Hegel.
Which is smart. There's a lot of truth and merit to it, but I don't know that it necessarily takes into account something that Ben brought up. We call these people NPCs, but in, like heathen traditions, those people are thralls. That is a vital aspect of human nature. It's an important part of human society to have these people that only do what they do, and that's just what they do. And you get to pass this kind of knowledge on through symbols, through art. That's why you have these masses of people who are like worshiping Marvel, and they think that that's really Thor, because that's how you're going to pass it along to those people. But, I don't know that, some of these, the thing with Gemini is it's a very close relationship. It's familial. These two beasts, they're one and the same, really, even if they're fighting. It's like two brothers. It's a brother war, really, right. Slave and master. And we've made these things divisive. Our culture has made this divisive, when in reality, there are people who have serving hearts. And movies and all kinds of culture has made it this bad thing. You don't want to be a slave. You don't want to be, blah, 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 even though they're doing it to us all the time. It's actually a relationship that's vital for healthy communities. You're going to have people who are like, I don't fight wars. That's not my thing. And so then you have people who are like, I will fight the war if you don't mind doing the laundry, because I'm going to be busy training. There's this tribal connection and trade-off. that no longer exists in our community. And it's difficult to get back to that kind of thinking because our culture's really dumps on it. Unless you're watching Downton Abbey, then you're all about it. But you know, you don't see these things as relationships. You see this as master and slave, and it's evil. And it's like, no.
Well, I mean, it is a relationship. And when you read, have you read Kojiv?
Mm-mm.
Let's see what my man says. So there's this guy Kojiv. He has one of the easiest explanations of Hegel, and it's a dialectic. And so if in these relationships of dominion, the master can become the slave and vice versa, and there's a movement that has to happen, right? And so through revolution, that movement happens, and that's how we're going to move forward economically and culturally, and also, you know, religiously. So, you know, we could talk about Judaism, we could talk about Christianity, and there's these great slave master reversals, right? That I think are key pivotal moments in history. I guess the downside of being a master is if you're a master and you speak in master discourse, and there's a lot of men who they're meant to be slaves and they start speaking in master discourse, that's going to lead to conflict for them.
Mm-hmm.
And if they're not able to handle it, they're going to be wiped out, because that is the price you pay for uttering certain words, right? So I have an extensive amount of Indian clients, and I discuss the Indian caste system, and they have your view, of the importance of that caste system. And I believe, sorry,
they're having trouble touching the bobs and vagines.
There's a little bit of difference there, but
so
I do think you can move out of those things. Absolutely, somebody who's a thrall can become somebody higher, but it ties into this esoteric, exoteric. You're going to have people. That's that revolution that you're talking about. And that's why some people will get it and some people won't. Some people will naturally be inclined to move forward into that next level of being. And some people, it's just going to take them longer. I mean, think about it like a spiral staircase. You're going to have people racing up those steps, and then you're going to have people who they're going to take their sweet time. So it's just dependent on people's speed, not necessarily whether they will or won't, and that they're stuck. Nobody's really stuck. Things are on a spiral. They're always moving. But I think it does have to do with that esoteric and esoteric. When we talk about knowledge being hidden, that's why, just like you were saying, you're going to have somebody in leadership who's got a hold of some truth, and he's wielding his magic like recklessly because he doesn't have any sort of background or foundation, and it's doomed to fail. And that's part of this influx of information that's happening right now. They're just saturating the market. Everything's available. You can find all these books on all this stuff. It's just insane. I'm not saying we should gatekeep, but I'm not saying we shouldn't gatekeep.
Right.
That's what I'm saying.
There's this man, Paul Virillo, and he says the invention of the car is the invention of the car accident, right? So if there's a freeway, people are going to die on that freeway. And if you start opening up esoteric knowledge, people are going to spiritually cripple themselves or make pacts that they shouldn't make.
And now you can sell life insurance, automobile insurance,
and now wizard insurance.
The biggest problem is
wizard insurance.
Yeah.
See, the biggest problem is with these books that are opening these things up. What these books are trying to do is dummy down and make a cult for idiots type thing. And the problem is when that happens, the mundane mind is not able to conceptualize things properly. So you end up with like in today's society, where this is something you've been probably giving quite a bit of pushback on, where you have this hermaphroditic push to society. Well, that's derived from absolute misunderstanding from too many mundane people looking at a cult and not understanding the way things actually function and viewing it with a very ignorant mind. And so there's something to be said about not giving that to the vulgar masses who are going to misunderstand and misuse what they've been told.
I think the goal is transhumanism, and a path to that, I'm going to be careful with my phrasing, is this whole gender situation that is being put forward. So I think there's people who do a lot of bodily modifications, and I have a chapter on transgenderism in the book, which was promptly wiped off the internet. And I hope you guys enjoyed it, because it's probably some of the most controversial writing ever. But before they can go into full transhumanism, they have to advocate heavily body modifications. And if they can get you to buy into the system, I think this is Alex Jones' view, then they could control your body and your mind, and then you'll be a more perfect thrall. So there's games being played on the other side, and I think it's important that we develop a literacy for those games, I guess.
I agree. I agree.
Cool. Can I answer a couple more questions, and then I'll run off.
Not a problem, brother. We appreciate
you guys have amazing endurance, so I guess everyone here's a bodybuilder.
It takes about 2.5 hours to get into the
That's what I learned. Everyone's a bodybuilder.
For about anymore, we only stay about 3.5 hours. Rachel's pregnant.
Wow.
We got a bunch of stuff going on.
5 or 6 hours easy.
We used to roll about 6 hours every Saturday.
Okay, Rachel is 2 bodybuilders because everyone has
my secret
tremendous endurance.
Ricola.
Yeah.
So let's
Oh,
see.
okay.
I thought I
That'll
saw
do
one
it.
more question there. I'm going back up in the chat here. I thought there was one more.
Yeah, most of the religious things were being asked out of the chat.
Thoughts on the Messiah,
That was not me trying to start.
Okay, I was like,
that was actually questions from the chat.
Okay, I was like, here comes the Viking questions. Here we go.
No,
Here comes the solar guy.
I'm not trying to be contentious at all. These were things from the chat. The things that I would be contentious about would be on. Like I said, we want to invite you on this other show.
Okay,
and it's not to lambaste you either, because I agree with a lot of your positions, and I agree with some of the things that you're putting your energy into. I don't agree with some of the things that you're saying, but again, we have a whole nother show for disagreeing with people.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Like that's a whole nother thing.
That's deliberating dog face
questions out of the chat, brother.
I think. I don't think we can talk for 2.5 hours and fully agree on So I appreciate and the other thing is my manosphere career, I went after a lot of people. So whenever people want to debate or whenever there's hard questions, hope you guys saw that.
The questions were about like India, and I guess I'll connect this back to Reddit. So now in current year 2024, there's not quite the women's sphere, but there's a popular podcast called Red Scare, which kind of connects to the Red Scare idea out of Soviet Russia. So these 2 women in New York, and they have, fans and haters and whatever. So the people that are kind of congregating around that community, and many of them don't even listen to the podcast or pay attention to the people that started it, but they started splintering off and having different subreddits on Reddit. And the reason they were doing that is because they had the disagreements, but also because Reddit moderators had different preferences, and Reddit admins, the owners of the site, want to be more brand friendly. And we have the election coming up in the USA this year. So Condé Nast, the magazine company, now owns Reddit. So this is a long-winded way of saying that some of the Red Scare subreddits, which are mostly women who are posting women issues types things.
Okay.
They were inundated by a lot of poo and loo, sort of come and go. Thank you, sir. Come again. Sort of racism towards Indian men, because there's a lot of Indian men and Indian women who are posting in English, taking over Reddit, and specifically the subreddit. So because they were kind of taking it over, maybe it was just a troll army pretending to be Indian, but it became a race issue, which then took down these subreddits. So many of those subreddits went private. So maybe if we're talking pendulum swinging, where 2016 it was manosphere, red pill, men's rights issues, Reddit's being taken down and censored. Now it's kind of this other sort of place. So it gets to be weird.
Okay, let me
Windows shift, Overton window.
Can you? I don't want to interrupt, but can you ask your question? Because I'm an expert on India. From speaking to them for thousands of hours.
And so I guess the stereotype of Indians working at Microsoft doing tech support, now they're on computers and now they're interacting with traditionally English speaking social sites. Right. So now they're all over on Reddit and maybe a little bit on Twitter.
Okay. Do you have a specific question, or I can just give you my experience?
Yeah, I guess the question is caste system, India, internet, globalism. They're talking now. It's traditionally an Anglo-American English-speaking space, and they're speaking very good English.
Right.
But people are like, as soon as they find out they're Indian, it's like, poo and Lou, get out of here. We don't want to talk to you.
So there's 3 times more Indians than Americans. So there's a lot of them, right? And the technology has been moving very quickly. And they before were economically not able to get onto the internet, and now they can.
Right. So it's just Bollywood's taken over and empowered them.
So I think their telecom companies have done a very good job of giving them internet connectivity. That's step 1. Step 2 is I've dealt with them extensively, and so have the people on my team. And they are colonized, and I'm just going to say it, they have an internalized racism where they look up to whites and they want to copy whites or their high caste Indians. And so they have this mythologized understanding of whatever is happening in the United States, and they think it's better. And Bollywood is largely responsible with that. One is the way the English colonized them, from my understanding, is they had their colonial system, and they're used to serving and being very differential. So that happens. And then the women have unrealistic expectations from all of the media that they're watching. And so that creates this cultural mix. The next thing is it's very hard for them to admit fault, and they will double down 2, 3, 4 times before having a complete meltdown. I have 2 articles on Indian men with pretty spicy imagery. I think you guys saw that because I've dealt with them extensively. And so this is globalization, and they have a different culture, and they were fed these values. And in my experience, maybe I didn't do it properly, but no matter how much I would discuss, like, listen, like, you need to get out of your colonial mindset. Like, you're Indian, go live your Indian life. Like, it's not going to be what you think here. And I know immigrants who moved, or like Canada's basically Indian now. So they're trying to figure out how to integrate into the Anglo-American culture, and they're looking for clues. And they don't understand that they can't integrate as a European American. They need to integrate as a Indian American. But the other thing is there's such a flood of them that they're not integrating well. And some people would argue that they're not integratable. So capitalism has a demand.
I don't think any people in mass are integratable into any other system unless the two are extraordinarily comparative.
Right. So the capitalist,
because they're not gonna be surrounded by enough of whatever they're integrating into, because they're gonna clump up and stay with each other.
Yeah.
And then that prevents the process of integration.
Right.
Yeah.
So a Polish person might integrate within, let's say, a generation or two, a Polish family, right? But if you're not European, it's gonna. I think Asian Americans integrated I don't know how many generations it took them, right? But realistically, you have to understand that the capitalist class needs cheap labor. And so regardless of they're integratable, they're not integratable, economically, they are going to flood the market with them because that's how they're going to cut costs and that's how they're going to cut your wages. So
it's the only way that they're maintaining the system, because every Anglo country, every white country is literally at a net negative for their replacement rate, straight up, straight up.
Right. And so you, the white middle class, are very expensive and they need to replace you with Indians because it's just a better bang for buck, right? So you could maybe you like Indians, maybe you don't like Indians. They're not the ones causing it. They're just a pawn that's being shoved. You could argue for demographic replacement reasons or economic reasons, but at the end of the day, that's how they're being used. And so a lot of these spaces are going to get completely inundated. And then the other thing is when you deal with some of these traditional cultures, which are patriarchal, when that patriarch is removed, when their traditional marriage is removed, they don't have a structure to replace it. And they're kind of looking for you to foist a structure onto them. But how comfortable do you feel as a European foisting anything onto? So it's this world of misunderstanding. And I've spent a lot of time talking to them, and they have a tendency of being differential for a long time and then flipping out into a big outburst and then running away because they're very conflict averse. So if you look at like beta male berserk mode, that's something that they're going to do. So I guess if you're dealing with them as an employee, which a lot of people are going to, I would say get my book because I have the courage to discuss Indians, 3 maybe more articles and how to deal with them. And my company deals with them extensively. And we have Indians who deal with Indians. So online, it's an extensive thing. It's not a one-off guy like before. It's a whole population that requires specific resources that I really, really tried to build to the best of my ability. I don't know else who did, but there's tremendous friction. And yeah, so in conclusion, move to Mexico because they're not here.
Here, so
the Mexicans aren't going to, their police system is more traditional, I would argue, in their enforcement.
Well, the integration process is going to go considerably on a different route in Mexico.
They're strong people, and their policing is traditional.
Well, yeah, they're going to be integrated organically as opposed to psychologically or
psychologically. Yeah. So, but that's going to be a thing that's happening, and so.
That's just part of the fourth industrial revolution.
That's the fourth industrial revolution, exactly.
And that's kind of the world we're living in now. So we've been talking about high value men, and regardless of Indian feather or dot or Buddhist or Muslim or Jewish or Christian or whatever you are, as a man, there's an idea of what a high value man is. And this is what we're talking about. How do you determine who is a high value man and what is the value the man brings?
Well, thank you so much for this conversation. I know we touched a lot of controversial topics and very delicate topics, but I'm really glad to have a group of people who are intelligent and dug through my book really, really well so we could have these amazing conversations. And I'm looking forward to being on in the future. Thank you so much.
Thank you, GLO. And the website is
The Pillars of Wisdom. Buy your copy before they figure out how to censor me.
Yeah, this is a first edition copy of a book. Rare book collectors are going to be wanting this, so buy as many copies as you can. Hoard them, put them in safe spaces, put them in canopic jars, and hide them in hills and caves and everywhere.
It's a beautiful book. Beautiful.
Thank you so much.
I'm literally, if my credit card information wouldn't be exposed, I'd stream that I'm actually pushing the button right now to order one. I would screen share, but I don't want everyone to see my debit card number.
Amazing.
So
Darn.
Yeah, it's absolutely a gorgeous book, brother. We appreciate you giving us damn near 3 hours of your time. Like I said, John Rowland there in the chat. We would love to, him, Marcus, and myself have a show called Deliberating Dog-Faced Dudes.
Okay.
We would love to have you on where it's more of a debate format. Although it's not like blood, it wouldn't be a
Blood and guts.
sport. Actually, and we're not even on the same page. Marcus is nobody fucking knows what Marcus is. And John Rowland is some form of Asian girl. I don't know. And I'm obviously an overly aggressive heathen. So, you got a nice mix, and we'll probably get somebody else on. But
one of our fun shows was titled "Should Women Vote and Should They Run for Office?"
I'm going to just argue against voting. I'm just going to argue against bourgeois democracies.
And that was kind of the argument. We said, women shouldn't need to be in politics and office, and that's something that men could do and take care of that, and then we'd have fewer problems. But there's plenty of people who want to argue against it, so we're always looking for hot, controversial topics for Tuesday nights. Perfect. On Deliberating Dog-Faced Dudes. This is Weaving Spiders on Saturday night, and we're coming to a conclusion. I don't think Jem got to say the name of the show. This is episode 268.
Lubricious Glow Up. Spider Pillars of Wisdom.
All right, thank you so much, guys. Really, really appreciate everything.
Thank you.
Looking forward to the
thank
show.
you.
yeah.
Thanks so much.
Have a good night.
Incredible.
Yeah, that was good.
That was great.
Do people understand the intro music better now?
I understood because I watched the interview.
Even knowing what our show is going to be, that intro was wild, Marcus.
That's pretty spicy. Yeah, I almost had to rub
My
one out.
virgin ears.
It's close.
The exoteric meaning of penis into vagina is how babies are made.
And then having the one of the theme songs, the Venisia. That was our good friend John Rowland. So that was his actual personal made original works. Thank you for the great weave on that, brother. But yeah, I would have liked to have gotten more into obviously on the dog face. I have contentions about what a alpha male is. Obviously, like when I look at my herd of animals, the one giving out the best hair and the biggest luxurious hair, he's not necessarily the alpha male. The alpha male, he runs out when there's danger. I have one alpaca that runs out in front of the rest. The rest all herd up and stick behind. He's 20 feet in front, 50 feet in front, whatever. And he's looking at whatever danger is like a mad beast and screaming at it. And the further, obviously for myself, I believe the epitome of masculine is husbandry, whether it be with animals, whether it be with the land or with your wife, being the provider and protector and all the things that come with that particular role. That is the alpha male. And if you ask me, no matter how much money you have, if you are that, like poor people outbreed rich people by far. So you have that going on, you're going to get somebody that really wants you to take care of them. They're like, damn, let me go ahead and get some shelter under that.
Rico has been taking care of me all night long, keeping my voice real strong. Thank you to our sponsor, Ricola.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to also bounce, but I did want to hear a little bit more about that because as far as his responses this evening, I do appreciate his stance and his viewpoint that what we see alpha as is going to shift in different cultures. I appreciate that viewpoint because that is absolutely true. Nailing down his specific view is a little bit tougher, but I do appreciate, that angle of things because I think that's smart to recognize for sure.
100%. Like somebody like me is probably in the Indian society he was describing extraordinarily off-putting. It'd be like freaking letting a pit bull in through a bunch of chihuahuas. Everybody just bellying up and pissing on themselves. Nobody's happy about it.
I'm not a fan of ankle
Well, in
biters.
the long
but-
run, if you don't decide to back off or they don't decide to man up, then the whole thing falls apart. You have to go live all by yourself and work through a proxy, if you know, because it doesn't work otherwise. You know,
Exactly.
to me, I think it's unfortunate that somebody as doofy and stupid as Vox Day was able to help popularize this whole alpha, beta, sigma, gamma bullshit, so that it's the main. You know, to me, it's not a good language. It's not. Well, yeah, Teddy Spaghetti's the whole reason that we're all saying alpha all the time, and he's a dipshit. You know, his dad's went to prison for being a crook, and you know, and Vox, honestly, if you dig into it, just kind of followed suit. He was a little smarter about it, and but that's the main reason, in my opinion.
For real?
Skibbity
Do
no cap
we
for
flush
real.
it down the skibby toilet?
My toilet.
Give it no riz. No cap for real.
I had my
or is that just
suspicion
sus?
that Alan was the Rizzler. I was suspicious this whole time. Look at Rachel knows.
The Rizzler.
I was suspicious the whole time.
Yeah, the whole
I mean, it's just,
male
that's my
conversation
request
is
to the chat and everyone on the internet that ever hears this. If we could come up with a new language default, so that we can talk about how men and women fall into hierarchical structure, and not say that guy's so alpha, bro, or whatever, you know, or that girl. I mean, usually if a female gives off alpha traits, they don't call her alpha; they just call her a bitch. You know,
right? Rude.
You know, at least nowadays, I would say that the taboo is gone. Where,
but that's partially because dudes don't like alpha chicks, and no, they don't want to have that recognition. Like at the end of the day, dudes usually want their chicks to be chicks, and so alpha chicks, dudes don't like that.
But that's the difference between a real alpha woman and one of these like beta alpha women. You know, we're going to use the terms like that's not.
Is that like, a hashtag girl boss you're talking about?
Right? You know, because I mean, if a woman is trying to be a man, that doesn't make her alpha. That doesn't mean that she's not, you know, gonna be submissive or, you know, allowing, gracious. You know, she's not gonna be a homebody. That's not what that means. An alpha woman does all of those things a woman should do. But she just doesn't. She doesn't hide it. She's not ashamed of it.
Alpha doesn't put up with any bullshit too. That's just it.
Yeah, she's not going to put up with
flexible, reasonable boundaries that she can check you. She might shoot you. You know, if the circumstances.
You know, I mean,
you said something funny, Rachel, because you said beta alpha together, and I texted Jim earlier in the week that the most annoying thing to me about this whole thing, and it's just my own personal pet peeve. Is that there used to be a grocery store chain in California called Alpha Beta. So I can't hear any of these discussions without thinking about going to the fucking grocery store. So to me, that's just, so now you know my pet peeve. That's the real reason I want new language. You know,
is Alpha Beta a sorority or a fraternity?
Call the main guy at the top the Wolfmeister. Let's change it to Wolfmeister. I think Wolfmeister is a better word. You know, that guy's a real Wolfmeister. You know, that to me that would be better. I don't know what the other ones are. We're open for suggestions on the other ones, but scrub, yeah. Don't be a scrub, be a Wolfmeister, bro.
All right. Well, I love you guys.
A Wolfmeister.
Move around for a bit. But yeah, great conversation. Good guest.
Good guest.
Yeah. Thanks
love you, Rachel.
Throwing off the belly. That's awesome.
Go sleep for two.
The baby growing.
My alpha flex.
Cool. That's right. There's not a higher flex on Earth. That's it.
No, that's the one.
I don't need to practice making a golem. I'm participating in ultimate science right now.
Ultimate science.
All right. Good night.
I was going to ask Christopher McIntosh, our previous guest, about the golem and the author Meyrink and all types of topics. So we'll have to maybe speak with him again as well. If you haven't seen the interview Balderson and I did with Christopher McIntosh in the previous stream, we premiered that 2 weeks ago. It's still hot and fresh. So be sure to check that out.
It's good. I watched most of it. I need to go back and catch like the last 10, 15 minutes. And I assume you guys talked a little bit after he left, but it was very good.
Yeah, I still need to sit down and watch it. I haven't been doing anything but working and cruising through stuff since I got home, and I really want to be full 100% attention. You know, not I can't.
No, you can't.
McIntosh is super smart.
The author of Occult Germany, and we want to get into Occult Russia.
Actually, I think he wanted.
Yeah, I think we could put McIntosh and GLO together.
Get the Northern Wind, I think.
Oh, the Northern Wind book, yeah.
So let's do that one. And I already asked Mario, and Mario said he would come on. Maybe
Beautiful.
we could try and schedule that as our return after Flattoberfest as like a return type thing. And Mario said he'd jump in too to try and because it's like a whole Northern symbolism book and everything too.
So we're getting into September now.
The audience here too is or for you guys on behalf of the audience, we had an announcement that we were going to take a little bit of time off. An exceptional opportunity came up to interview this guy and to talk about his book. Are we still planning on reserving ourselves from next week after?
This next week, we're going to have Flow State next Saturday.
Okay. Cool.
Flow State. I don't know if you guys can make it, but we're going to get your art projects out and your books, and we'll do some classic flow stating.
Saturday night art parties with the spiders.
Nice.
Well, it's a flow state.
Get some work done, reading literature. Some books. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I do have some books I could read.
That'd be great.
So.
Pillars of Wisdom.
Pillars of Wisdom.
I ordered mine. I mean, you know, the price is high, but I figured, well, after everything he said and you guys giving it glowing reviews, you know.
Yeah, I'm gonna sadly send this one off to you guys, but I think I'm gonna order my own because I want this book on my shelf.
Plus, then he said I put my phone number in there. He said he'll call me on the phone, so we'll see what he says in person.
Get a one-on-one tech support call from GLO.
I'm sure it's going to be the upsell on the coaching, but I'll talk to him for 20 minutes.
I think he'll talk to me in an Indian accent.
Coaching right now. My goodness.
We'll both be sitting on a loo together.
I need to touch Bob's and vagines.
Yeah, no wheezing of the juice, bro.
It's a squatty potty.
What's up, Layla?
That's always my favorite Indian, stereotypical Indian voice was the guy telling Pauly Shore that he's not allowed to drink directly from the Slurpee machine.
Well, yeah, it was funny to see a lot of these AI images that were being generated, which were absolutely terrible, disgusting, and hilarious all at once. It was a lot of Indian guys outside of Microsoft corporate headquarters in India with just brown streaks everywhere.
Oh, dude, I don't know why it's so popular right now. I don't know if it's an op or if it's a organic thing, but you know, the fighting against the Indians online and the Indian men especially, and the terrific pushback. Yeah, there's a lot more of them than us guys, so don't be surprised if you decide that you're gonna poke the bear and attack all the Indian guys in tech service and other tech stuff. Don't be surprised when they
on the bright side, if they ever actually come for us, I'm good for like 9 of them at least, just barefoot at once.
Just a personal note, I don't think that thought really enters into their mind.
I know, that's how sad they are.
There's no way. Well, nobody thinks about that.
Eventually, I'm going to go Jay and Silent Bob.
Attack the American men. Yeah. There's no way that nobody thinks let's go to America and attack American men. They just don't. This thought doesn't enter your mind if you're sane.
Do high value men ask for coupons and discount codes? I don't know if we'll be able to answer that question tonight, but there's not a discount code WTF.
If there is a discount code, you'll have to find it in the Spider's Telegram. We'll drop it in the Spider's Telegram if there is one. He doesn't seem like a discount kind of guy to me.
These are, these are, you know, print on demand. There's a lot of work.
Really, it wasn't us just blowing them up. Flip through it again, Jim. The book is really a beautiful book. It's not a chintzy ass book.
The layout of each page is very intentional.
Pictures, yeah. Yeah, there you go. Like big
The
pictures like
graphic,
that.
the graphic design, the layouts, the font choice, everything is very, very beautiful. High
He spent
quality.
a lot of money.
Yeah, and time.
This is a magnum opus. This is a life's work. And he was telling us how he was kind of competing against his ancestors, his grandfathers, the other men who had written books and things. So he really wanted to put a lot of work into this effort.
Well, you got to realize too what he
Failed
said.
you.
Part of the reason why it's good that you were able to get him on, Marcus, is because he really has been heavily censored.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean that you have to go agree with what he said. But as we know, information that's removed from availability has immediate higher value because that means somebody desires to remove it from availability to you, you know. And that's really a big part of the conversation we had tonight was that information that used to not be available, period, zero, no matter what, has been dumped on us in abundance now because the world is changing. And so now you can get the Sefer Yetzirah, and you can get a brand new translation of the Zohar, and you can get a whole bunch of stuff that, you know, never would have been available in any language, let alone English, you know, so things have just changed. So.
And there's also the quality of, you know, if you download a PDF and you're reading it on your phone, your screen, it's a digital document is so much different than a paper copy.
I just make the robot lady read it to me. I don't even sit there and, you know, look at my phone like this and, oh, yeah, there it is. I just push the little button that makes it then I get the robot lady reading it to you, which is not the same as reading, folks. I listen to lots and lots and lots of audio of stuff, and it works, you know, good. It's good, but it's not the same as saying, all right, I'm gonna put my phone down. I'm gonna make sure it's quiet enough in here that I can tolerate the background noise level. I'm gonna read. It's a totally different thing, you know. It doesn't mean the others aren't valuable.
.com. That's the name of the website. It's a real website.
Yeah, there's
a real book.
The Pillars of Wisdom. I know, it makes me jealous. I got to write a book, I guess.
Fucking Sean.
Well, I got my 10 years. There's more than 10 years. I'm older than him. So, I mean, I definitely have enough information here.
Well, if he does, where will that book be? Where until that happens, where will it be, Jim?
We live in your mind.